gonna be huge. Oh my god! No! Hello everybody, my name is Kai, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the HEARTSTOPPER Netflix adaptation of the original comic by Alice Oseman. You see, I'm in the midst of finals for college, and yet I can't think of anything else, because what happened? The show came out. I binged it with my friends. I can't stop thinking about it. I cannot do anything else. I'm hoping that making this video essay will finally calm me down after I've done 3 days of straight research, and I haven't done nothing else. I simply cannot do anything else. So what has this led to? Well, it is 2 a.m. on a Friday, and I am in an empty classroom, and I hope no one will ever sees me do this. And today I'm going to be presenting to you a very deep dive into all things HEARTSTOPPER. You might be wondering, what are my qualifications to do this? Well, you see, I'm gay, I'm trans, I'm obsessed with this comic and with this show, and I watch a lot of Mike's Mike. So in Mike's Mike fashion, and in a lot of video essay fashion, we're going to be diving into HEARTSTOPPER. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to be giving a non-spoiler section, an overall review that will not be really in detail. Overall, I think it's very obvious that I hold this show in very high regard. There's a reason why it's rated so highly, and that's because it's a show that really displays and understands the nuances of queerness and queer culture in a way that is so well balanced. It is very telling that since the original author, Alice Oseman, was so heavily involved in this project that it is phenomenal. And you can tell right off the bat that it was written by them. A lot of times when it comes to adaptations, especially something that found a lot of success, there's this worry that it's going to be done very poorly. And especially when it comes to topics that have to do with queerness, it's important that we really shed light on it in a proper way that doesn't diminish and hurt queer people. And so having a show like this that is great for all audiences, not only queer people, for them to feel represented and for them to be seen, for both fans and non-fans of the comic, but also for audiences that are not queer, for parents, for people who might need to get an understanding or might want a better understanding of how to conduct themselves in a way that is going to make it more comfortable for queer people. I think it is a great, fantastic show. The actors are phenomenal, the cinematography is phenomenal, there's gay music, the dialogue is so smooth and seamless. It really just feels like you're there with friends. It's a feel-good show, and I think that everybody should watch it. So that is the conclusion of my non-spoiler section. I hope that you like that, but please read the comic, watch the show. I think reading the comic first really adds a lot more to the show. For me, it also has that sense of nostalgia because I've followed the comic since, I don't know, the beginning of high school, and so I really do recommend that, but you know, do what you like. It's time for the spoiler section. Spoiler. I'm going to be diving into both the comics and the show. I'm not going to be really spoiling anything that happens in the comics after the first season of the show, except for certain things that I think are kind of important to touch on in terms of the character development that I see later in the comics. And I'll give a warning ahead of time so that you know if there's spoilers. Before I introduce our cast of characters, I think that it would make sense to go into just the general plot of things. So first, let me introduce you to Nick Nelson and Charlie Spring. They are the main characters of the story, and we are first introduced to Charlie as our protagonist. He is in year 10 of high school, and Nick Nelson is in year 11. They first meet in a class that mixes grades in the school, and that's how they come to meet each other when Charlie's assigned to sit next to Nick in class. Just for simplicity in introducing the characters, I'm going to be talking about Truman first.
Not me saying the wrong school name the whole video. It's Truman.
So in Truman, the teachers that we have that are probably the more main teachers that we see is Mr. Jai, who is the art teacher and sort of mentor to Charlie and someone Charlie can go to in tough times. We also have Coach Singh, who is the coach of the rugby team. Who's on the rugby team? Nick Nelson. in terms of the people that are at Truman, specifically Isaac and Tao are at Truman, but Elle is not. Elle is now at Higgs, but I categorized her here because she is part of the crew, obviously. Wait, what is that behind? Hold on. Oh shit! Yeah, Tao's like this, but he's also like this. Ben's like this, but he's really like this, honestly. Anyway, let's go back. While we're talking about Truman, we have this category of people who I like to call the habitual offenders. We have Ben, who Charlie sort of has a little fling with, but Ben is a little dick and ruins it, and he sucks, and we don't care about him. And then we have Harry. Also, I didn't have a picture of him, so I drew him. He's a little shit, and so he's a little shit. Now moving on, we have Higgs. Elle transferred from Truman to Higgs. Higgs is an all-girls school. That's because Elle is transgender, and she did not have a good experience at Truman, so she transferred to Higgs. And now we are also introduced to Tara and Darcy. Getting into the families of the main characters, we have Nick's family. We have Nick's mom, and we have Nellie. All right, these are the main characters. Nellie is probably the only character we had to care about in the entire series. Maybe not. Just kidding. Okay. Charlie's family includes Tori, Spring, and Charlie's dad. Very cool individuals. We love to see it. Charlie's mom is also there, but she's not really put in the scenes, so she's not relevant within this season. Does not matter right now. So yeah.
There's also Imogen, who I forgot to add to the board. I'm so sorry, but I will talk about her a lot.
Okay, so the first topic that we're going to be going over today is trueness to the comics. How much does the show differ from the comics, and how does adapting to on-screen change from the comics, and is that better or worse? Well, for the most part, we see a lot of truthfulness to the comics, especially when it comes to iconic moments that fans treasure so much. But a lot of the changes that were made, I personally believe, expand the universe a lot. Mainly what we see is certain characters are not included, such as Charlie's little brother and Aled.
Also, these guys, who I hope make an actual appearance in season 2, could add more nuance to the rugby lads.
Now, I know we're all devastated that Aled could not be in the adaptation, but a huge reason for this is because Alice didn't feel like she could make Aled's story really fleshed out in the series. Okay, that makes sense. I can understand the cutback on the characters because you don't want there to be too many people in the main cast. Instead, we are introduced to 2 brand new characters, including Isaac and Imogen, both of whom I will be talking about later. But overall, the biggest difference in the Heartstopper adaptation is the way that we've expanded on a lot of the characters. Mainly in the comic, we focus on Charlie and Nick, and then we also have side characters who, even though they are fleshed out within the comic, we don't really get to see them as much as we did in the show. I think, especially since we know that Alice Osman is the writer, creator, and one of the executive producers on the adaptation, it is very relieving to know that these new expansions on the characters aren't off-kilter, don't feel out of place, and that's because we know them to be true. The author made it. Instead of just following Nick and Charlie and then sort of seeing these other characters, smaller segments within their story, we also get to see a lot of Elle's story. We get to see what it's like at her new school at Higgs and her adjustment there. We learn about Tara and Darcy much further than we ever did within this segment of the comics. I think the Heartstopper adaptation has a way of really having a narrative focus on so many of the different characters and balancing them all in a way that makes them very dynamic without it being overwhelming. And of course, when you're having a Heartstopper adaptation, you can't not have core scenes and core little tidbits and Easter eggs that will make the fans go nuts. And this is why it is so important to read the comics before, just because it really elevates everything. I mean, come on, y'all. We have the sweatshirt with the snow. We have the drum scene. We have that original ink pen explosion scene. It's one of my favorite scenes of all time. And seeing the way that it's acted out and how they decide to put the blue on his hands and spray it on his shirt, it is just phenomenal. I was losing my mind. The S-word scene, the rain scene. Y'all, we gotta talk about the rain scene. We've got that and just so much more. Little details and tidbits that really just add, like Tori sipping on her lemonade, as we all know her to do. Tao with his large-ass beanie collection. This is what we love to see on the screen. That care and that attention to detail. And along with that, it feels like the comics didn't really leave the show because we have animation from Alice Osman illustrating throughout the show, and I think that this is such a great choice, not only because then you feel connected to the comics and the style of the comics that we all know and love, but also it emphasizes a lot of the emotions the different characters are feeling through the animation and shows a more visible and clear representation of what's going on so that you can understand it better. But wow, I can't even imagine how much Alice put into this. I mean, writing it, creating it, just making this whole world and making sure everything was correct, but doing animations within it throughout. I can't even imagine. Y'all, I tried to animate once. No. The next category I'll be going into is believable characters. Something I noticed throughout the time of reading HEARTSTOPPER is that the reason that it's like no other comic I've read before is because of the way that you can tell Alice Osman is also a young adult novelist. And I don't know if Alice planned this a lot more ahead of time or something, or if she is just naturally gifted in some way, but the way that HEARTSTOPPER plays out feels extremely well paced, and that is a huge reason as to why the comic is so successful and so good. And so it's interesting to think about how is that pacing going to be adapted onto screen, especially since a strength of the story is that it doesn't rely on a lot of the things that are dramatized about queerness in order to keep the audience's attention. And so when you're adapting it onto screen, how do you make things feeling let's pick up without it falling apart, or making someone feel like it's dragging on? In a character-driven story, it is extremely important that you have these characters be full of personality and make it clear that attention was put into the way that they were written. Even in the comics, the side characters are expanded upon. They aren't just placed there for no reason. They are talked about, they are frequently there, but especially in the HEARTSTOPPER adaptation, this is seen even more. And some of my favorite parts are the dialogue. The way that the characters talk with one another is so realistic, it feels authentic and natural. When Charlie talks to his friends, it feels like you are a part of that friendship. I can name numerous conversations that I've had with my friends, especially thinking about my friend group in high school, that we've had conversations similar to this. It's conversations that are sort of in tune with queerness, or just having people in tune with one another, that really makes sense. And the jokes are just so funny, and these are jokes that come within people talking amongst one another, where they are both inside on the joke. They are light, they're fun, they make sense for each of the characters' personalities, and the dynamics between the characters and their dialogue changes so smoothly. Whether it's Charlie talking to his sister and her sort of teasing him about the way that he crushes on people, or if it's Tao who's worried about him but also is a very sort of fun person. The way that Isaac doesn't even need to say anything, but the actor really just brings his character to life and makes your heart warm. All of these things, an open environment that they all provide for each other, is so incredible. The dialogue and the delivery of that dialogue is just so spot on, especially since a lot of it is taken directly from the comics word for word, but also the new additions to the way that the actors interpret these scenes and their lines, I think is just done so phenomenally. I really wouldn't believe that a lot of them is their first time acting, or their first time in a major on-screen debut situation. In the dialogue, there's also an integration of just things that queer people would say, such as Charlie mentioning that gay people can be masculine and that bi people exist, to his friends rolling their eyes, not because they don't believe that, but because they're like, Charlie, you are hopelessly so gay, you homosexual, you need to stop. Like please.
He's straight, Charlie.
That kind of writing and dialogue, to that degree, it can only be done by Alice Osman, I feel like. But in general, in a lot of media, it feels as though the way that young people are written and the way that the jokes are made feels very out of touch. It feels like it's made by people who are older and have no idea what young people are like, who are trying to incorporate slang in a way they do not understand. So it's very refreshing to have something like this, especially since Alice, being so young, is more in tune with how things are. Moving on, I want to talk about the conflicts and also the mental health and hints at neurodivergency that we see in the characters. It is so refreshing to see queer media that doesn't have this emphasis only on terrible things that happen to queer people. That's what's so great about this, is that when it comes to representing queerness, when it comes to representing people of color, when it comes to representing all these things, we don't just need one type of thing. We can't just always be talking about the way that we're suffering. Bring awareness is different from hammering in the idea that we're all going to die and suffer for the rest of our lives. That's not necessarily what it's like, even if there are marginalized groups that face discrimination. Discrimination doesn't automatically mean your life is going to be over forever. So it's nice to see a plot line that understands the nuances of queerness and the problems that people can face from it, but mostly focuses on queer joy, mostly focuses on that. And in so many ways, that can be seen as a super radical thing, just queer people existing. And showing that without it being automatically associated with suffering is incredible. Because many of the conflicts are not necessarily connected to external factors, though they are in relation to them. It's much more having to do with internal conflict or interpersonal relationships rather than it being about this huge thing from violence from coming out. The way that coming out is shown is also portrayed in a way that is a lot more based within an internal acceptance rather than an external acceptance, though that also is a factor that plays into it. And mainly what we see is just this flourishing friendship and eventually romantic relationship between Charlie and Nick, and how that blossoms, the navigation of different friendships and the conflicts that can come from that without the focus having to be about all the negativity that can surround how other people view queerness. I love how the conflicts make sense. Queerness is not there for drama. It is not there to dramatize a plot. That is not how it should be introduced. You should be going into media wanting to represent, not make things be spiced up a little bit more in your very boring show. Next, I want to talk about mental health representation and neurodivergent coding. From the beginning, it is very obvious that both Charlie and Tao deal with some form of anxiety, and from what I remember in the comics, Charlie does have anxiety, along with other problems that are addressed later in the series. And there are many things that I could discuss in this topic, especially since there are a lot of subtle hints at other characters and the way that they are dealing with their own issues, like Tori Spring, who we know deals with depression. But specifically, I want to talk about how anxiety is represented in Charlie versus in Tao. Charlie's anxiousness has a lot to do with the way that he feels like he can't live up to his own expectations, basically, of what he thinks he should be doing for other people. He's always the first to blame himself, and he has a very warped perception of the way that he is perceived by others. This is emphasized by the animation, which shows different scenes which are sort of twisted in Charlie's mind of how he is anxiously going over them in his head and interpreting them and assuming how other people feel in the situation, typically in a way that he feels that he did something wrong. So you see him often apologizing for things before people even said anything about how they feel, assuming that things went wrong, and the way that he's really spiraling with these thoughts that he has. In comparison with Tao, Tao's anxiety is a lot more centered around his fear of change and his fear of being abandoned by others. He is very protective of his friends, protective of keeping things the way that they are and maintaining that so that he does not feel like something will be out of place and then ultimately change where people will leave him behind. I think the way that these two characters portray anxiety so differently is really well done, because sometimes the way the characters are written, they are made to be drastically different, so that the same issue that they have is presented in extremely different fashion, when in reality, mental health is a lot more nuanced than that, and characters can share a lot of similarities while experiencing and reacting to situations very differently.
I know you probably don't want to talk to me ever again, but I at least had to say sorry. I don't know why I'm so afraid of being alone.
The anxiety both Tao and Charlie experience center around other people and their fears and their own insecurities and deeply warped perceptions of themselves, and yet it's manifested so differently. While we're talking about realistic characters, it's very nice to see neurodivergent coding throughout the show. A lot of the characters are very obviously showing signs of being neurodivergent if they aren't already known to be neurodivergent in the comics. It's very nice to see people who are showing these traits that I can relate to, or in a way that maybe I don't, but showing their alternative way of viewing the world and viewing things around them that neurotypical people may not see. See a lot of clear signs for anxiety in the characters, signs of depression. A lot of people on the autism spectrum relate to Isaac in particular. I think Imogen probably has ADHD. As someone who has ADHD, I don't know, yeah. The thing is, the show doesn't center around mental health or neurodivergency, and maybe we'll dive more into mental health in season 2, especially since it becomes more central to the comics later on. But in general, realistic characters and real people are at the intersection of these different categories, such as neurodivergency, queerness, being a person of color. All of these things are representative of that.
Hi, I would like to give a content warning for discussions of a forced kiss scene and verbal abuse. Please skip to 2245 or the next chapter if you don't wish to view this.
While the show mainly is happy and very light, it also addresses a lot of larger problems, but does so in a very sensitive and nuanced way, often not making it into a central part of the show, but not ignoring it either. After we have the establishment of Charlie's relationship with Ben Hope, a guy who he meets up with in the library to kiss in secret, we see more of Ben's true colors as he pressures Charlie to meet, shows that he is verbally abusing him and has done so in the past, and then forcibly kisses Charlie without his consent, which is sexual assault. It's something that happens within the first episode, and even though it doesn't take up space within the rest of the show, it is not like it's ignored. It's something that is clearly thought about in terms of the way that Charlie then handles it after. The reason that I want to talk about this scene is because in a lot of ways, many would think that this is very tame, and though I'd agree that it is more tame than a lot of the more severe things that are shown on the platform of Netflix and in a lot of teen shows in general that depict more violence, I think that it's important that we have this. It is in the comics. A lot of this stuff that I'm talking about and the realisticness of the characters is very reflective of how incredible the work of the HEARTSTOPPER comics is. But in the show, it dives deeper into Ben's character a little bit, and that is important in the sense that a lot of the male love interest characters that we'll see in media, specifically in things like After or in The Kissing Booth, depict male leads that are unpredictable, do not communicate properly with their partners, and this can be very dangerous. So when we see the association of thinking abuse is only physical, or that these actions of things that are grounded in jealousy and thinking that that's okay, there's also the idea that it's okay to forcibly kiss someone because they'll probably like it after and they'll get into the moment. That's not at all what we should be teaching people. And so when you have the situation where it is in a lot of ways seen as more tame, and it could be excused as Ben trying to figure out his sexuality and it being just more complicated than that, it is still set in stone as that this is never going to be an excuse when someone does not give their consent for you to kiss them, for you to have contact with them in that way at all. It is not okay. And addressing that that's not okay is extremely important. Even though Nick helps Charlie out of that situation originally, it's not that Charlie needs to be saved. This idea that people need to be saved by their partners and be reliant on their partners in order to deal with their problems is also an unhealthy codependency. So instead, we have Nick being proud of Charlie and Charlie being proud of himself for the fact that he's able to stand up to Ben and doesn't let Ben take advantage of the power that he has over his self-esteem. In eliminating that and gaining his own confidence is a great representation of something that we might dismiss originally.
Spoilers for Charlie in next volume of the comics until the end of the chapter. Skip to 2350 or click on the next chapter marker if you do not wish to view this.
Also, just this showing the early signs of Charlie, having trouble with his eating disorder in a time of deep distress. When Tori offers the food, he says he's not very hungry. One of my friends pointed out the way that he stirred his bowl and was just looking at his bowl of cereal at one point and just he's picking at it, talking about how a lot of times with eating disorders, you just don't even notice until it happens.
That's an observation my friend made based on a personal experience with their eating disorder, though not all people may feel this is true for them.
But also that there's a sense of control Charlie feels from not eating. It's like he's punishing himself, but it's also something that he has control over and that he can't help.
I look forward to seeing how Charlie's mental health will be portrayed in the future. There's a lot of potential for having good representation of his and other characters' experiences with things like anorexia, depression, OCD, PTSD, etc.
Next, I want to talk about the way that texting is incorporated into the show. Not only is it just designed well because, okay, you know how many times in movies and TV shows someone's texting and you don't even know what they're saying. They're texting, they show the screen. You can't read it. You need to pause to read it. It's so frustrating. But in this show, we see the phones. We also see on-screen graphics that are drawn because there's so much texting going on. And it makes sense because teenagers, we text a lot. There's a lot going on in our text messages, and there's also a lot of anticipation when it comes to texting back, or those waiting periods in between when there's someone that you really want to talk to, such as your crush. And so developing those moments and making something that might seem boring, still having it move around a lot, and creating the anticipation that a lot of us have experienced when we text our crush, or just text someone that we want to get along with. Really cultivating that feeling a lot of us can relate to just makes sense. Just makes sense. I like how it's also used to show more of how Charlie is feeling. He'll say what he really feels, and then he'll go back on his texting and like backspace, and so you're seeing his thought process, how he limits what he's saying maybe to keep things more smooth. There's also the incorporation of the gay key smash. I just wanted to add that in. We had the gay key smash, and that is queer culture, as we know. And just the scene where we see Nick and the way that he's trying to find the right wording to reach out to Charlie after what happened with Ben. It's hard to know what the right thing is to say to convey exactly what you're feeling, and trying to figure out a way to balance between not overstepping but being there for someone. When you show that through text and the way that he clarifies things for Charlie so well, I think, yeah. Next segment I'm going to be addressing is Nick's arc in coming to terms with his sexuality. It is such a beautifully done thing, and I just need to make a whole category for it because, oh my lord. There's this whole idea around the concept of coming out. It is seen as sort of this big, scary, one-time thing that you do it once, it never happens again, and it's so dramatic, and it's big thing, like, you can exhale, Simon. Like, no, not necessarily. It's not always like that.
I'm just kidding. Love, Simon was a step forward, and I love Becky Albertalli. The book is much better and she's a queen.
What I mean by this is that the concept of quote-unquote coming out is not necessarily reflective of what it's really like. When you are coming out, you do so many times in your life. You come out to yourself. You come out to yourself again, maybe, in my case. And there's telling other people. There's people who knew you one way and now see you differently. There are people who stay. There's telling people that didn't know. It's like you're always coming out. And so coming out is not like this event that just happens one day and it's like, wow, and everything happens at once, and either people love or hate you, and then everything is solved. It's truly just not like that. But especially since so much queer media and depictions of just queer people in general in shows surrounds the idea of coming out, especially the violence that comes from it in a very grotesque, almost trauma porn-like fashion, it is so important to have a show that talks about the internal struggle of it in direct parallel with the joy that comes with it. And it also feels like a very authentic and modernized version of the story, just because we see Nick's character grow so much, but also in the way that he does his research about bisexuality and comes to figure these things out about himself is just such an experience that I feel like so many queer people have had, where we take that online Am I Gay quiz, or we take that time to watch YouTubers who can talk about these issues, and it's a huge comfort figuring out little things in our past that we did not realize before are clear signs that we were the gender we are, or we are the sexuality we are, etc. Such as in the scene with Nick looking at the Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh yeah, we've been there. They're hot. Really in this, I wanted to address the way Nick and Charlie's relationship has so much more focus on the wholesome aspects of them getting to know each other, of their friendship first, and their relationship in, relation to that, but the way that they complement each other, the way that they have banter and they get to know each other, and then Nick's slow realization about his feelings and navigating them. It's the way that he looks at Charlie. Like the drum scene. Let's just go over the drum scene real quick, right? It's like Charlie is holding his hands, and God, it's such a classic plot line, but it just hits different when it's gay, okay? And then so basically, like he's holding his hands to like help him play the drums, and Nick is just so atrocious when he tries, and it's just so adorable. Like everything they do is so cute. Like the show itself, it just makes you sob, but also just out of happiness because it's just so beautiful, and you've been waiting for it your entire life. Like I don't know, maybe that's just me. Anyway. the way they play in the snow together, and Nick starting to develop these feelings that he doesn't really understand, being nervous about trying to hold Charlie's hand, and Kit's body language, like Nick and Kit Young's, and Kit Connor? Kit Young? Am I crazy? What's his name?
I had notes, but my notes said Kit Young Lamau, so I thought Kit Connor was something I made up.
Who's Kit Connor? Am I thinking of Curtis Connor? Kit Curtis Connor. The way that he's nervous about sort of holding hands with Charlie and the fact that he desires to do so. I just remember in the comics when he wanted to grab Charlie's hand and then he looked over at the screen and saw this straight couple on the TV. Oh my god. We see Nick first thinking about this topic when he starts researching about it and sees so many things about discrimination. It makes him fearful, especially when he has no idea how to navigate these new feelings. And so that's where it comes into the importance of introducing other queer characters, communicating, and also doing research. Finding the YouTuber that he does who talks about bisexuality is a wonderful thing, because so many of us have done that. It is an extremely common experience to look at the internet for help and to do research about labels, finding that sense of community online, because YouTubers are such a big part of how we discover these things from people who have those experiences. It just really changes the way that you view things. And even if you find that the label doesn't fit you, it's still comforting to know that, to have access to information from a source that is just a real person. Along with this, and when I talked about the introduction of other queer characters with Tara and Darcy, I think it is just not only wonderful to have a sapphic couple or like a lesbian couple in the show, because it is so important, showing the nuances between the challenges that lesbian couples face or that sapphic couples face versus the things that gay couples face, just because their social reactions are just very different. Nick being able to talk to Tara and Darcy about his feelings for Charlie and have a safe space to test out how he feels coming out. It's so well done, that pacing of him figuring things out, being afraid and fearful, having those times when he has to draw back from Charlie, when he's afraid that people will see him, because no matter how much of an ally you may have felt like you were before, how accepting you felt you were, a lot of the times there is way more internalized homophobia that you have that you didn't even realize. I know that I definitely experienced that, and coming to terms with it and being not as afraid of what other people are going to be thinking about you is so hard to deal with, is something that you have to get used to, and that sometimes takes a lot of practice to steel yourself for it. Showing a safe environment that someone is allowed to have for themselves to come out, making sure to emphasize the fact that Nick does not need to come out before he's ready is so important, especially when we're comparing the way that Nick deals with being closeted versus the way that Ben deals with being closeted in their relationship with Charlie. When Nick is communicating with Charlie, when they're both checking in with one another, and there isn't necessarily this sense of shame that he has for the relationship itself, more so a trouble with outside acceptance and his own internal sort of issues with coming to terms with figuring out a label for himself, that is extremely different, especially since he always takes Charlie's feelings into consideration and they talk about it. It's especially understandable since even though Nick has a lot of people that would support him, he's also sort of surrounded by a group of friends who haven't really shown signs of being supportive or are outright just homophobic, such as Harry, and then just Ben being Ben, because he's one of those cases of like, oh, what's gay and homophobic at the same time, and that's Ben, I feel like, yeah. And just educating on bisexuality in general, of the idea of just so much confusion, of feeling like you have to pick, do I like boys, do I like girls, genderqueer people, non-binary people, who do we like? Like, it is very nice how it was talked about, of just that feeling, that internalized conflict, and the establishment of Nick still being bisexual even though he is in a gay relationship. Just showing examples of the right way to approach things. There are so many times when Charlie could have easily just told someone about Nick and his relationship just because it would have been easier on him, and yet he never does.
But he's my friend.
Fine.
Or just always emphasizing that Nick take his time, and Tara saying that he doesn't need to come out when he doesn't want to, especially since she's empathetic of his situation because she is facing ridicule from her peers. I feel like that's good. I think that's enough. I don't need to say more. But it really just, it's like everything is great, and then we get to episode 7, Bully. It just becomes heartbreaking. Everything is falling apart. There's so much tension and conflict. But one of the main things that I think in terms of Nick's arc that is such an important thing to understand is that looking at the perspective of what Nick is like and seeing what his characterization is like, Nick is not a violent person. Nick does not really get angry at a lot of things. And so for him to just fully snap in this episode because Harry is being such a massive dick and has for so long, we can see it here, is horrible. It's horrible because there's so much buildup that had to get there, because he's realizing how much Charlie went through and how much Charlie is used to and thinks is normal when he does not deserve that in the slightest. So much of his anger is just derived from empathy for other people. It's just devastating that he got to that point when he chose violence, but he would never want to do that. And you know that he doesn't want to do that. It's just that he's so fed up with everything. And so as things are kind of falling apart and we're like, oh shit, what's going on? Then we get sort of resolution in which, again, Charlie is doing things for himself. And I just want to mention that this is such a great way to also represent the way that people struggle with mental health and neurodivergent, etc., is that we are not victims to these things, that we are capable individuals. It's not like we need others to take care of us or we need neurotypical people to take care of us. Charlie knows how to utilize his support system, and it's a very important thing that he has that support system, which I will address more later. But talking to Mr. Ajayi helps give him the confidence to step out into the sports activities day, but it's him that decides to do that, and he's the one who goes out there even though he is really withdrawing into himself. And although that is his way of sort of coping with problems typically, he steps out into the field. And this is where Nick's arc comes full goddamn circle. Oh my god, I know I skipped over a lot. It's because there's more I can say about this stuff later. I have a different segment because I know that kind of went from me being like, oh my god, everything's so sad, and then now it's good. Okay, but look, okay, whatever. So basically, the way that this scene is done is just so good. Oh my god. He steps onto the field. He's killing it at rugby because he's so good at it, as we know. Good for you. Then he's supposed to kick towards the goal. I'm sorry, I don't really know much about rugby. I'm American. I also don't know much about football. Sorry. But basically, even though he's trying to score this winning shot, instead he runs off the field to see Charlie. And this is where I was like, wait, are we gonna have a Love Simon Ferris wheel public moment? I was afraid. I was like, look, I wouldn't be that upset about it, but I would be like a little annoyed about it, because one of the biggest criticisms when it came to Love, Simon and that adaptation is that their kiss was super public, but it didn't need to be like a super public thing just because it's supposed to be an intimate moment between these two people, especially when you have so much buildup to the reality of there being just homophobia. Hello? But of course, we need to have faith in Alice. We need to have faith in Alice always. And that is because they always do it right. Nick takes Charlie's hand, and that is a very public thing, but then he drags him away, and it's people get the idea. Then they go into the corridor, and the corridor scene, the blue versus red team corridor scene, I don't know if you know the extent to how impressive this scene is, because if you didn't know, Alice wrote this scene a week before they had to film, while they were filming the bowling alley scene. How do you do that? Like, how do you just write that? Well, there's like just colorful lights everywhere, and it's distracting, and there's like dim lighting in your bowling alley, like, and you're filming on set as the executive producer. That's insane to me. That is insane. Also, when like people are watching you, like, what are you writing, Alice? Like, I will never understand. I will never understand. Extremely impressive. This scene was super well received, and that's because it's fucking fantastic, and we needed it. We needed it. Alice also describes this. It just makes sense after all the build-up, the conflict, the way that Nick, he needed to take his time to come to terms with himself, but having this scene where everything's just coming full circle, and then he's able to relay and put his feelings out on display even more than usual, because I feel like he's an extremely communicative and expressive person. But this scene is just what we needed. We needed him to just be like, look, Charlie, I know that you just aren't gonna believe me so much of the time, and I'm just gonna need to keep reminding you because it's just factual that I just really fucking like you, and I don't care about like all these things. You're not ruining my life. Like, this is like all these things that are happening. I do not care about them because I want to be with you. And it is such a well-written scene, definitely way better than the way that I just described it, because what was that? It's like a balance between the cheesy ass romance shit that you want as just represented for gay people, but also having that be so communicative, having it be very clear, especially with Charlie being super understanding towards Nick the whole entire time. It's a way of clearly having that give and take. And it's just really cute. It's just really, really cute. And God, it's like so bright and beautiful, and like the sunny and the lighting. Yeah. Anyway.
See if maybe there's a chance we can still be friends.
Charlie.
I don't want to lose you because I did something stupid.
Charlie. You're my favourite person.
Nick.
I need you to believe me.
Nick! I believe you.
So now I'm going to be talking about the cinematography, the set design, and the music. I'm going to move over here. Wait, no, I don't like that. I'm going to move over here briefly because then I can put images over here to display the gorgeous fucking cinematography. Okay, so this show has high production value. I'm just pulling words out of my ass. I don't know what that means. I am not a filmographer. I may not know many things about cinematography, but I was forced to take a class at my art school where we did do things with video, and I do know some things about art. And so I think I can talk about this at least a little bit. So the first thing off the board, we just gotta talk about the soundtrack. The music is so good, and it's on theme, because everything in that playlist, I'm pretty sure everything, tell me if I'm wrong, but all of them are queer-related bops, if not outright queer bops, okay? So I actually don't know a ton of music, but I know a gay song when I hear a gay song. But anyway, they're bops. They're all great. They fit so well, like in the end title screen, the way that introduces like each scene or transitions one scene to the next. Like there's that one time at the beginning of the first episode where Tao Su comes in to be introduced to the scene, and then the music is like rising. It's like do 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 do, and then he puts, that was not the sound. He puts the drink onto the table. And when he slams the drink onto the table, the sound just cuts off. It's such a good transition.
I did it again. I bought Elle's drink again. It's okay to miss her. Of course I miss her. She's my bestie. I love her.
And it's probably basic. I'm probably just like amazed by small things, but like when you have to film things and when you have to learn how to time music correctly to transition and like make sure that things are on beat so that it looks satisfying to the viewer, it is just really cool to see those details and understand them a little bit better, even if you'd only know a very little bit. Yeah, anyway, my note says gay music, integration of actual queer culture, true. It's just nice having actual queer culture within the show, like rather than the interpretation of what queer culture is by non-queer people. I said gay music, I was levitating. It's so true. Then we have consistent color scheme. Okay, this show is so aesthetic. Every frame, everything is so good. If you take a still from the show at all, you will find these colors in them. It is very consistent. It's consistent in the props and the things that people wear in the corridors, and everything is matched up in a way, and it just makes sense. It just feels so cohesive, and it's really, really pretty. Charlie just walking through the hallways, you'll see it's like the blue on the wall and the yellow on the wall. In the uniforms. Sorry, I forgot the name because I went to a public school that doesn't have uniforms. But like the uniforms that they have and ties that they wear, or even the ribbons that they wear in their hair, even like the color scheme in the art room. The art room has so many different colors going on, and yet the main ones that stand out is the blues and the yellows, maybe a little bit of orange. There might be a little bit of orange here and there, but it's mainly blue and yellow. It's very consistent. I just want to also say that in terms of just things looking nice and being presentable or pretty, even Charlie's books look nice. Like, okay, I'm sorry, but when I was playing an instrument in school, this is what my book looked like. Like, is it supposed to look good? Like, it's not gonna look good. When I carry textbooks around, they usually have terrible covers, and they make you want to cry. Yeah. Also, side note, speaking of the instrument I played the violin, and when they started doing that little orchestra warm-up, I was brought back to a place I didn't want to be. I was so terrible at the violin. I remember doing the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on stage in my middle school. Messy, y'all. We don't want to see it. Back to the cinematography. The way that things are filmed is so narrative. Even though the main story is about Nick and Charlie, the way that it switches to Elle's perspective, the way it switches to Tao's perspective, and you're seeing things from their point of view. It's very obvious in the way that it isolates their characters, or that scene where Elle is searching for her friends at Truman and Tao is searching for her. The parallel between that and just the comparison is super well done, and it's just them staring basically at the camera, but it's just so good. There's this scene with Charlie after Ben, as usual, is being the worst, and then Ben leaves him in that room after they kiss, and Charlie, that sense of isolation that he feels in his own relationship with Ben is really captured in the way that the camera is pointed at Charlie looking away towards Ben, but he's just isolated in the room as it's closing. Oh god, it really just focuses in on the perspective of those characters and what they're seeing. In terms of set design, can we talk about the art room? The art room is so beautiful. That's what I imagine an art room would look like if a school really cared and funded their art program. I don't know, it's just, it's so gorgeous, but there's so much character to it. It's so colorful, it's beautiful. I love everything about it. I love that the corner Charlie sits in has a tree branching out from it. I think that that's really wonderful aesthetically. That could also be seen as metaphorical in a way in terms of him branching out and sort of growing as a person, because it is a very much a coming of age show. Oh god, it's just beautifully designed. It's gorgeous. Like, just look at it. Please just look at it.
Also, these bedroom designs popped off so hard. I love them.
Another scene that I want to go over is the party scene. The party scene is a cinematic masterpiece, and it better be going down in history forever, because that party scene is phenomenal. Here's why. There's this big contrast from the outside. It's like very blue where Charlie gets dropped off at the party, and then just goes like boom, color everywhere. It just sort of, I guess, shows like that overwhelming feeling, especially since Charlie is super disoriented. He's not comfortable in this kind of setting. It's not really his thing. The only reason he's going is to see Nick. The moment he finds Nick, there's a sense of ease that kind of goes over the situation, and Nick being like, I was looking for you. Again, what straight person would do this? But then when they kind of go to a more quiet area, the part where Harry comes to goad Nick into talking to Tara, so and you're seeing Charlie being left alone and his perspective on that, along with what Nick is actually doing, which is being like, hi, I don't know why I'm here, sorry. But what really gets me is what comes after all this. Tara talking about how she could avoid all this if she was just out to people, and that it doesn't need to be an announcement. She just wants to sort of not hide as much anymore. Nick being, happy for her, looking for Charlie after confronting the fact that Harry is, an asshole, and telling him directly to his face, like, dude, I don't even like you. Happy birthday, though. Searching for Charlie. And then the shakiness of the camera of Nick trying to find Charlie, the way that is reflected, the conflicting light colors that are also in the bicolors, by the way, but also just a conflict in the lighting. And it's just one of my favorite things is showing directly the impact of representation on screen. Usually you see representation in general on screen, but you don't really see the impact of it and why it's important. I love the way that this scene is done, and you see Nick directly being affected by the fact that Darcy and Tara are being so openly with each other and are just like each other so much, and their relationship with one another, not hiding it and being free within it. It slows down, and he's just kind of watching them from afar, sort of in awe and like desiring to be able to be free like that. When they finally kiss, the lights go crazy, everything turns rainbow, the beat drops, and it's There's confetti everywhere, and the confetti is on Nick, and oh god, it's just so well conducted. And the way he smiles, and it's just such this unbridled joy that escapes him. And that's because finally he's seeing that representation. He's like, that could be me. I like Charlie so much, and that could be me. And so that gives him the confidence to go find Charlie, to see him, and for them to have that moment together, which is just so beautifully done. I lost my mind when I saw the hotel room situation, because it looks just like the comic. I was freaking out. So were the people I was watching it with. We were like, oh my god, it's the hotel. We were like, it's the room, because it looks exactly like it. Everything, there's so many things that look exactly the same that just I was going insane over. But yeah, I was like, oh my god, it's literally the hotel. Like, that's the same exact place. And this scene, you could cut the tension of this scene like butter. The tension of it and the anticipation of it, while also the awe I had while watching it, just because it's done so purposefully and well. The hesitation between the characters, the slowness but desire between them, and rush of confidence Nick had. The way he doesn't directly say it, because he doesn't necessarily know yet how he identifies, but he's like, well, how do you know that it's a girl that I'm crushing on? And then Charlie just looking up at him and going, are they not a girl? And the use of they them pronouns, thank you. But also, it's just so tender, and it's just so beautiful. And oftentimes there's this notion that queer moments of happiness, joy, those private moments need to be interrupted by something. The number of times that you see queer people in the middle of, let's say, kissing, or just having some sort of intimate act together, they're interrupted, something terrible happens, because something terrible has to happen. Queerness always has to parallel terrible downfall. Like, no, it doesn't. And the fact that their kiss is not interrupted, and like they fully finish it before there is the conflict, they sit there in that moment with each other, is just so well done. And this is done for all the kiss scenes. But yeah, also another thing with the set design is, in terms of just Easter eggs that are just really cool, is Charlie's bedroom is exactly the same as it is in the comic. Everything is in place. Also, Alice Osman's books are like littered across his shelves, or in Isaac's hands, because Isaac's reading the books all the time. Also, Nick's bedroom, it looks pretty similar to me. I think it's the same. Just the set design, when things are the same and you're just freaking out because they look exactly like how it is in the comics, really great feeling. Now into the next segment, we're going to be talking about how the actors bring life to the characters. So I may not be extremely familiar with a lot of UK actors, as I am not from the UK, and I also don't know that many actors, but in this show, I like how we see a lot of new faces. Many of these individuals have never acted before in terms of like official acting, or this is their first big production. And it really is unbelievable because they're fantastic. I am very impressed by this, especially because so many of the interviews were done over Zoom, like some of the auditions were done over Zoom, and the results are astounding, folks. First up, we have Joe, who plays Charlie Spring, Joe Locke. The way that all these
Actors
are just the embodiment of their character blows my mind. Joe Locke has this way of expressing Charlie every time anything kind of like good happens with Nick, or just the way like that he just looks at Nick in general, and the way his face lights up. His face transforms, I swear. His face transforms when it lights up, and it makes me want to just melt into a puddle, because it's so radiant. I don't know how he does it. It's such the embodiment of Charlie, because Charlie is that kind of person where he is such a bright human being. He cares so much, and so clear that his joy is derived from the simplest pleasures in life and the love that he shares with his friends, which is such a pure and honest way to live. And I think that Joe Locke is really great at emphasizing that. But not only does he play, those more happier moments well, but there are these monologues that Charlie has, particularly the monologues where he is talking to Ben, that, wow, they blow my mind. The scene where he is first talking to Ben after Ben wants to meet up with him, and Ben's like, I just think that you're scared, and Charlie's like, why would I be scared about this? I am already out to everybody. This doesn't make sense. You're the one who's scared. You can't even look at me. You can't even, reciprocate anything because you're so terrified. Like, how can you sit here and be so hypocritical right now?
You're the one who's scared of getting caught. You can't even look at me when other people are around. Not to mention the fact that you have a girlfriend.
Yeah, I've seen you with her at the school gate.
Thanks for telling me.
Oh wait,
You didn't.
But yeah, phenomenal scene. His expressions shift so drastically from a sense of happiness and wonder to just being so deeply hurt by things. I simply cannot get over it. Next, I'm going to be addressing Nick Nelson, Kit. Also, I've been calling him Kit Young for a little bit. That was an accident. You see, Kit Young is from Shadow and Bone. I'm so dumb. Anyway, Kit Connor. Can you believe that he auditioned for the role of Charlie? I just think that's so interesting, like the way that he auditioned for the role of Charlie, and they're like, clearly you're not Charlie, but you will be Nick now.
But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't think I'd get that far because, you know, I was obviously auditioning for Charlie, and I don't know, you know, whenever I tell people that, they quite quickly get quite confused, really, because I don't resemble Charlie at all. There's literally no resemblance there, so it would have been an odd fit if I was cast as Charlie. But yeah, I think quite quickly they realized, yeah, maybe this guy might be a little bit better for Nick.
I can't imagine anyone else being Nick. I think that he plays him so well, even just down to the smile that he has and the genuine nature that he's able to portray that is so Nick Nelson. Yeah, the idea that he's a golden retriever is completely true. Nick Nelson has so much golden retriever energy, it's just overflowing. Kit Connor is just so perfect for this role in every way. His expressions feel so genuine. The way that he's able to conduct Nick's character feels so authentic to Nick's character. It really does feel like the actors are friends with each other at the very least. Not that I'm trying to like insinuate anything about like sexuality or anything, because that's not my place. I don't think it's people's place to insinuate about celebrities' sexualities or things like that. But yeah, the way that he smiles at Charlie, the way that he is so attentive and his use of body language and clearly caring about other people, understanding and being perceptive of what Charlie needs in that moment, or maybe what other people are feeling, is so well done. In particular, I think when there's conflict, his use of his body language of avoiding eye contact and rolling his shoulders because they feel tense for that oncoming anticipation of speaking what he knows he needs to say. When he said that he got in a fight with Harry, he like moves his arms in a way that show nervousness. It's just the subtle ways of doing it. It's just great. Yeah, he just exudes bright golden retriever boy vibes, and I love that so much for him. Oh, when there's conflict, the way that he talks and is like just so incredulous of the cruelty of other people, because I think Nick's character, he really just cannot imagine why people are so mean or rude, and really does have a lot of faith in others even if it's not deserved. And so when he comes to that realization of that cruelty, he just can't. That scene at the party where Harry is saying, hey Nick, oh, you just feel bad for him because he's gay, and he's like, what? The way that Kit is able to deliver certain lines, I feel like is just so spot on. The defensiveness he has for Charlie when Charlie is blaming himself. He's like, you shouldn't have to deal with this. You shouldn't have to understand all the time. That you not have this terrible experience and have to be okay with it. Oh, also the way that he smiles at his phone. Oh my god, all the way that Nick and Charlie both smile at their phone. So good. Okay, sorry, moving on. William Gao. William motherfucking Gao. All right, this man, he can have my life savings. I love him. And this is because Tao is a very particular character, and I feel like it's hard to get him right. The way that the show portrayed Tao reveals a certain level of characterization that we hadn't seen previously in Tao's character, and seeing Tao like that, seeing the way that William Gao really leaned into the silliness of Tao's character and the sort of extravagance of his character is so wonderful to see. I love the way that when he's talking with Elle, he does a little dance at one point, and he has these like dramatic ways of saying things with a certain amount of flair, and the way that he like so clearly rolls his eyes at situations when he thinks things are ridiculous, and he'll say things in funny voices.
Thanks. I'll treasure this stewed potato always.
He has so much life to him, so much going on, and even when he's having conflicts within himself and he talks about it with Elle, he is still so lively when he's just like, Nick is taking Charlie away. The world is ending. Everyone's leaving. And it's like, Tao. Like, Tao, please.
Or maybe he just thinks you'll force Nick to watch Donnie Darko like you did with us.
Shut up. It's a good movie. It's just complicated.
He's a comfort character for sure. They're all comfort characters. It's a comfort show. It's a comfort show. Also, his depictions of his anxiousness and his anger, especially in the episode Bully, I think is super well handled. His anger, it's directed at Charlie, but it's mainly directed at himself. and we clearly see that in terms of his regrets of just wishing that he knew, and the situation clearly feeding on things that make him anxious and are very much connected to what he cares about. Also, the way that William Gao delivers the comebacks to Harry, yes. Unparalleled. Unparalleled. Thank you. I've said what I said. Okay. Isaac. I heard that they did a lot of searching for Isaac, and that Isaac was one of the harder characters to cast. And I understand why. It's because Toby Donovan has this way of conveying everything that you need to know about what Isaac is feeling without saying a single thing. Isaac barely says anything, but you know exactly what Isaac is thinking. So expressive. He has this playfulness about him that is just so wonderful to see. He's just such a comforting person to see like in a scene. In a way, I feel like Isaac is sort of the embodiment of just if the fandom was involved with what was going on in the story. And I think that that's just a satisfying thing to see, of just Isaac being like, these gay bitches are so dumb. The scene where Charlie is like, men can be masculine, okay? And bisexual people exist. Isaac is just like, and he like rolls his eyes like, this bitch. Dude, so good. So good. The way that he goes to hug Elle and he's like, Elle, and like, because when he does say things, it's either matter of fact stuff, because he's like, Tao doesn't want to talk to you, or it's like saying hi to Elle, and or like, Tao, come here, you should join us hug. Man of little words. Man who doesn't need many words in order to convey everything at once. The way he laughs, I love Toby Donovan's laugh. The actor just has such charm. He just has such charm.
Sorry for interrupting, but Miss Singh told me to give you some antiseptic wipes. Okay.
Next, we're gonna talk about Elle, the wonderful Elle, played by Yasmin Finney. Well, first of all, she is a very good actress. I think she plays Elle super well. Second of all, she's very gorgeous. Why is everyone in this cast so pretty? I am so gay. Anyway, when Elle is opening up to Tao about being at her new school, she talks about how originally she didn't even try to make friends because she didn't think it was worth it. And I think that this is really well depicted in the first scene that we see with her, where she's in the cafeteria, she's texting Tao, and then we see that she's like, oh, it's great here, it's fine, like no one's chucked a sandwich at me. Like, okay, sure girl, but like, I guess. But she's very isolated. And a lot of times she seems very reserved, but it's not because she's a prickly person. It's more so she seems to be anticipating people won't really like her, won't really get along with her. And she needs that first opening, and that first opening is given by Tara, who is kind to her. And when she extends that hand, it's much easier for Elle to open up. What I really like about her is she's able to be upfront with her friends in a way that's very helpful, and particularly for Tao, when she's like, Tao, you're being ridiculous, or like things like that. She's not afraid to do that, but she also does so in a way that is friendly and makes sure that the person is in on the fact that she's teasing them and there's no malicious intent behind it. She's just a well-balanced character. Also, I really love her characterization in relation to her friends, Tara and Darcy. We often see women pitted against each other. It's just nice to see a genuine friendship and there's nothing else happening for drama purposes. They're just there to be there, you know? Live their life, having a hard time opening up to others, but always really being there for her friends. But yeah, she has this great way of conveying that hesitation that a lot of trans people tend to have, especially since we tend to experience a lot of things later because we spend so much time not being an authentic version of ourselves. And so when we finally get to be in that position of being more authentic, we still feel very behind. There are a lot of experiences that we might have not had because we simply weren't able to do them as ourselves. We had to do them as someone different, or we didn't feel comfortable enough within ourselves. It is just so clear that Elle being portrayed by a trans actress means so much more for her character. It just makes it so much more meaningful because you know that for Yasmin it's meaningful.
I'm not sure why I didn't talk about Yasmin's acting as much, but to add, I love how Yasmin controls her facial expressions. All the things I said about Elle was to credit Yasmin for portraying her this well. She has her come off as not that expressive, but also not cold or unapproachable. Elle remains a warm and loving character that is extremely relatable to a wide audience.
Oh my god. Okay, we're moving over here. Time to talk about Tori, alright? Time to talk about Tori motherfucking Spring. Time to talk about Jenny Walser. Jenny Walser has this way of delivering the lines like in such a flat, like blunt way, but it adds so much humor to each scene. I love that she's not a main character at all. She's very much a side character for the story, but she still appears a lot. It's not like the characters that are introduced are there without purpose. They all are planned out. They're not just there for no reason. And that includes Jenny. I love the way that there's this establishment of their relationship, like Charlie and Tori's relationship. I mean, their family dynamic together is really lovely because it's very much grounded in, you know, her teasing him a little bit and him being like, shut up, Tori, and like Tori kind of just appearing out of nowhere, sipping her goddamn lemonade. Love that lemonade. We love that for her. And there's this one scene in particular, because like normally we've just seen her sarcastically or like very bluntly delivering her lines, which is very, very Tori. But something I noticed during the last episode when Tori is comforting Charlie and asks him what's up because he's playing the drums really loud, and she's like, what are you angry about? Like, what's going on? And when he tells her, sometimes I'm thinking that maybe I should just disappear, and clearly is in an extremely dark place and spiraling to that. The way that she holds him and that her eyes like kind of like bulge out of her skull, but in a way that's like such a visceral expression of pain for her brother and for his situation that she clearly relates to, that we know that she relates to, if you know like the context of Solitaire. I mean, that just really got me. And also the way she's like, well, you're not ruining my life, then offering the food and just conveying how in her own way something that she can do for her brother and just be there for him without needing it to be her saying a million different things, without needing to be a big speech. And a lot of times in queer media, there's this idea that you need to like have some big speech to solve everything. You need to be decisive with those moments. And sometimes having a small moment like that has a big impact. All right, it's time to talk about the Higgs girls. Both Kizzy Edgill and Corinna Brown
It's Corinne Ayudumi.
have this way of lighting up the entire room with their acting, but I love the way that it manifests in very different ways. For Corinna Brown, she portrays the character of Tara in a way that's just very empathetic, very open. She's the first one to approach Elle. She's the one who is just super friendly to everybody. And like in general, she plays like a very like friendly character and has this way of joking and laughing that just feels very realistic in terms of the interactions that one would have when they're talking about being gay and like people not knowing, you know, because the part where she's like, and her hands are soft, that is the gayest thing I've ever heard. And it's true. But most of all, I think what really hits is her monologue that she has in the episode Girls. Apparently that's the monologue that Corinna Brown auditioned with over Zoom in her bedroom. Like, okay, damn girl, go off. So good, because you really just feel the character's emotions. You really feel what Tara's going through, this buildup of just all these horrible comments or just microaggressive comments towards her that are building up over time, the way that she didn't expect things to change that way. She's not as used to or as comfortable with the people and their perception of her, and because she just wasn't expecting it. It's not because she regrets it or doesn't want to be open about her relationship like that. It's just she is so tired. She just wants a moment of peace. And her talking about this and putting so much emotion in her voice before she lays on her girlfriend's shoulder, super well done. Talking about Darcy, when I talk about them being very just bright in general, I love how they put all the chaos that we see in Darcy in the comics into Darcy's character, like the trumpet thing where like Darcy tries to scare Tara with a trumpet, the way they quickly eat the food in the cafeteria or like say things very quickly, clearly conveying that Darcy is saying things that are just on her mind, the way that they laugh and bring life into Darcy's character, really conveying the way Darcy is so comfortable in the fact that she just doesn't give a single shit and is like very relaxed but also just has the most chaotic energy ever, is just super well conveyed. Ugh, there's this one scene where Tara kisses Darcy and they're on the field together and like she almost has this look of awe and surprise as though she's just remembering and realizing that she has like the coolest girlfriend. Oh, I don't know. It's just small details. It's small details. It really is. I just want to make a testament to the adult figures that we see throughout the show. They are very genuine and I feel like they're portrayed in a very lovely way, considering a lot of times queer people, we just do not see adults who care or seem like they know what they're doing when it comes to these topics, with just the assumption that it will go wrong. And so seeing them really just doing that, like, thanks guys. But especially the scene with Nick's mom, the way that she just moves into the scene and she's so attentive. I heard that she cried because it was such an emotional scene. and so important, and she got emotional about it. I think there's so much value in the fact that an actor actually, cares and is immersed in the value and importance of a scene, especially since so many people are using this scene to come out and tell their families about their sexuality. Yeah, but yeah, she's a great actress. I do wonder if she's one of the actors who had a debut role. I'm sure she's just never been in anything else before. Anyway, moving on. All right, best cast. I'm calling it right now. Nelly. She's fluffy. She's lovely. She's comforting. She's cute. She's a dog. She's Nelly. Enough said. Thank you. We gotta talk about Ree Norwood, who plays Imogen. Is Imogen not up here? What's wrong with me? Wait, this whole entire time that I've been here for like 6 hours or 7 hours, Imogen hasn't been up here. What the hell? Wait, I'm so angry at myself. I am so sorry, Ree Norwood. It is so late, and by late, I mean it's the next day, and so I simply cannot print out your picture right now. Anyway, so this is about Ree Norwood, our icon, truly. The point I wanted to make is that Imogen's character is clearly a very expressive, extravagant sort of character in the way that she acts. She just reminds me of like ADHD. As someone who has ADHD, like I mean this in the best way. I love that for her. Something that I noticed that I think is so great about Ree Norwood, in particular for her acting, is Imogen, we don't see her super often, but Ree Norwood has this way of just transforming her face one moment to the next in terms of her expression. Her face is extremely expressive, and the way that it conveys emotion is insane to me. It's one of the most expressive faces I've ever seen. There's the part when she's at the park with Nick, and when they're talking, her face goes from like regular I'm anticipating something bad to happen to, oh, the bad thing happened and I'm devastated. She takes things so heavily, which is also an ADHD thing, but anyway, maybe it's my headcanon. Maybe I'm projecting. But yeah, props to her, because I heard this is her first acting role. I think that's incredible. Hope she gets more stuff from this. And yeah, so lastly, who else are we talking about? We're talking about Sebastian Croft. It is so funny to me how much he seems like a very lovely person in real life, but then he's Ben. He's like has to play Ben. It's so funny because you see his Instagram and he's like, I'm so excited for you to love Heartstopper and hit Ben Hope, and like Ben Hope is censored. But yeah, I think he's got it down. He got the, facial expression of I'm not moving a muscle in my face. Ben Hope expression of being like a little dick. Also, the addition of Ben speaking more was very interesting in terms of just the horrible things he would say to Charlie. And we kind of lift his nose a little bit, be like disgusting. But anyway, he conveyed the S-hole very well. Though I don't want to spend that much time on Ben, because I don't give a shit about Ben. We can spend time on Sebastian Croft. Because like, dude, look at this man. Okay, he seems great. I cannot. The next segment I'm going to be addressing today is the communication and the healthy relationship representation. This is incredible. I know that I've said this before, but the way that media often portrays a lot of relationships and the idea of what romance looks like, typically, in my opinion, very warped, but I think that a lot of us can agree on this, is that it's not always sacrificing for another person, of this idea of like jealousy being a cute thing, like even when it's in excess, or there being a lack of communication being a normal thing, and just people not talking. I feel like we can just do so much better, and we can also address the idea of consent much better and allowing ourselves to be more in tune with emotion and these core things that are necessary in relationships. So I just want to address the way Nick and Charlie's relationship is so good because of their communication and the way that they talk to one another, but also the communication that's established in other relationships as well, and between characters that even don't get along. In the relationship between Nick and Charlie, from the beginning, we see that even though Charlie can sometimes feel very awkward or is a very anxious person, he really lights up around Nick, and he's so much of himself. It feels like Nick is almost enhancing Charlie, and Charlie is enhancing Nick. The big thing is the way that they balance each other out, and that they enhance each other and make themselves, both of them, become brighter. Did I just make a rainbow? That was like so homo of me. As my voice disappearing. From the beginning, we see these super cute moments established between them that show that they are able to joke with each other, that they're able to have these very fun moments, and instead of there being this idea that that you're like so nervous around your crush that you're nauseous, or enamored with someone to the point where it's destructive. Instead of Charlie feeling so nervous that he's sort of reserved into himself, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad or inaccurate thing, but it's just nice to see how instead he is drawn out with Nick's presence.
Duck, I can just... Let me just... Get off! How dare you? Better? Maybe.
He is full of life, and you enjoy them getting to know each other. Like, yes, you want them to get together, but it also feels like there isn't this rush for them to get together because it's so satisfying to watch their story unfold. It's so satisfying to see how they talk with one another and how beautiful they are. Yeah. Like that moment with the smiley face on the hand, and the way that when Nick asks Charlie to join the rugby team, Charlie says, "Aren't I a bit like small and weak for it?" And Nick goes, yeah, you're just gonna be reserved. Like, also, it's just, you know, a high school. Are you saying that I'm small and weak? And it's just, they're so funny with one another. The scene with the milkshake, so when Nick is like, "How dare you, you know, how dare you?" Wait, hold on. Oh my God, I'm so American. Hold on. It's like, "How dare you criticize my bubblegum milkshake?" Sorry, Nick, gross. And then Charlie's like, "Well, I made a better decision." And Nick's like, "I'm stealing this. This is mine now." "Oh, we're sharing though, because we're a couple." Like, oh, it's just so good. It's just so good. The establishment of those little moments are so perfect. I think a big difference comes from the idea that you don't need to necessarily be nervous around a person in order to like them. There can also be this deep comfort and naturalness to the way that you are with them and the way that you feel with them that makes it even better to be in a relationship together. When Charlie's feeling upset or feeling anxious, Nick is very perceptive of this happening, and he's able to sort of draw Charlie out of it, whether it be through joking or like clarifying things to him by literally just like putting his hands on his face, being like, "Charlie." Remember that scene? He's like, "Charlie, no, I like you, like I promise." But this is a huge thing, is Nick always comes to talk in person. He comes to talk in person to clarify things, especially since it can be very hard to indicate what you're actually feeling if you're not talking in person. And he always comes to talk in person. Like the rain scene, the motherfucking rain scene. I will never get over the rain scene. I swear to God, I screamed, okay? I levitated. But basically, like, coming to talk to him and showing that he wants to put an effort into the relationship. Charlie doing the same when he's there for Nick while Nick is trying to navigate his sexuality. And it's showing that even though originally it could be seen as like Nick is this perfect, amazing guy who's coming in to show Charlie, who has a low self-esteem, that he can be loved, and Charlie can't believe it. But on the flip side, it's also Charlie is there for Nick. Charlie's so understanding of Nick's situation, and even if it's frustrating for him, even if he's not going to convey that, and yet at the end of the day, he is mostly frustrated about the fact that he wants Nick to be okay, that he wants Nick to be safe, that he doesn't want Nick to get picked on in the way that he experienced. Yeah, just the way that they talk to one another is great. It also just displays a way to handle situations appropriately when someone is anxious, in a way that's caring, just having patience for one another when you're both dealing with issues and checking in with each other. There's this constant reassurance that they make sure that they both have, even if I think a lot of times for Charlie it comes from anxiousness. It's still, you know, very good to have, of like them checking in with each other. He's like, "Wait, you didn't just do this because you thought that I wanted you to, right? Or is this okay? I would like to kiss, are you sure?" And making sure that there's those clear parts of communication. Also addressing when it comes to conflict. Nick is not perfect and he makes mistakes. In particular, directly after they kiss, Nick is freaking out. He's also still afraid of his peers finding out about something that he isn't even sure of himself, which is completely understandable. But even though he only leaves Charlie for a second, Charlie just, he leaves. He feels like everything's falling apart. He's way too like overly aware of things, anticipating for something to go wrong. And he's had previous experiences with Ben that has led him to believe that will always be the case. So you feel for both characters, but then how do they come back from that? Because honestly, I think Nick stands up so much, probably more than I would have for myself at the time, definitely. And it's so terrifying because there's so much peer pressure around him, and yet he's still like, "I need to find Charlie." At the end. And then he was scared, he got up and he left him there, but yeah, it's too late. And so, but he wants to clarify in person. And so he's standing in the literal rain because he just ran there. He needs to tell him. It's just so cute and romantic. Oh my God. And He has no umbrella. He's so dumb. I love him. He's upfront and honest about things. Charlie's like, I'm so sorry for kissing you. Like, clearly I messed up and I don't want to ruin our friendship and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Charlie. And he centers him again, and makes him focus on something right in front of him. Super, super well done. And then he's like, I'm so sorry. And it's because so many times Charlie's the one that's saying sorry, and he's like, don't say the S word, don't say the S word. And he makes sure to be like, no, I'm the one who should be sorry. You should not be apologizing for something that isn't even your fault in the first place. You just feel like since it's a conflict, it's your fault. I didn't mean to run off like that. I wish I conducted that situation better. And talks about what he's dealing with, how he's having a full-on gay crisis, but saying it's not that I didn't want to. I wanted to do that. It was something that I wanted to do, knowing that Charlie might jump to conclusions that he didn't want to actually do it, that he's having second guesses, and that even in second guessing, he would feel super guilty about it.
I was just freaking out because I was confused and surprised and, like, honestly, I'm having a proper full-on gay crisis.
But Nick is like, no, I wanted to do that. I am just so confused and I'm having a tough time with that. And then I like how they really just have a moment together and they embrace each other. Because in a lot of situations, you'll see in relationships that when they talk something out, they immediately start like making out or something, but instead it's them holding each other. And it also makes a lot more sense for their age group as well. Another part of the conflict is when Nick says yes to going out with Imogen. And oh my god, dude, the scene where he's talking to his mom, and his mom is like, oh, do you like this girl? And he's like, well, her dog died. What straight person does this? I think what we really need to understand here is that even though this is not necessarily a good thing to do, it's pretty understandable that in the situation, not only was Nick surrounded by the peer pressure of all these guys egging him on and like this very public confession from Imogen, but also him saying no to her could put him, subject to like more inquiries and questions, but also could have been not great for Imogen. Imogen, who is his friend, and if she was denied in front of a bunch of these random guys, it might have not really boded very well for her. You don't know how they're gonna react, his friends or his mates. But I think that the way that Nick addresses the situation is done super well. Tao is a good friend and tells Charlie when he finds out. He's like, Charlie, look, this is what I found out about Nick, and I can't keep this from you. I'm not gonna keep this from you. Charlie has a lot of faith in Nick. He's like, no, Nick would never do that. And Nick did do that, but Nick did it in a very Nick way. He didn't know how to say no. Nick makes sure to tell Charlie what actually happened. He's like, I don't want to go out with her. I don't feel that way about her, but her dog died and I felt bad and I don't know what to do. But I will make it right. Him addressing the problem, apologizing for it. I thought we weren't supposed to say the S word, but I actually did something wrong. Very good. And saying, how he's going to solve the problem. We're miles in the future from the kissing booth. After is a distant memory. But I think it's a really valuable scene and an important thing to note that sometimes when we have a rival love interest, let's say, or like we have the main couple that is very obviously going to be together and that we're rooting for, we're often disregarding the feelings of a character who in a lot of ways is seen as like posing a threat to the relationship. Imogen is Nick's friend, and leading her on in that way is not okay. And him clarifying to her and being honest with her is the best way to address the situation and the way that's going to result in the least hurt overall, because he's honest and upfront about it rather than her getting her hopes up in the long run. Having that moment with her saying, you're afraid of doing something that might surprise people. He's like, I'm not making sense. And she's like, no, I think I understand. And thank you for being honest. Like, she doesn't need to be a villainized character. God. Stop hating women for no reason. Please, that's all I ask. Stop hating women for no reason. In particular, I would like to highlight that one scene where Charlie is clearly distressed about something, about, thinking Nick is straight. And then Nick, oh God, Kate Connor, what the fuck? Okay. And then he leans in and he goes, what's up? Like, talk to me. Oh my God. Now I just wanted to quickly go over some of the other ways that there's healthy communication in terms of the friendships, even just the different dynamics that there are with different people and like family members, such as Charlie opening up to his sister and her just really empathizing with him because, as we know, Tori, deals with her own mental health issues and especially depression, and her hugging Charlie close, being there for him. A lot of times we want to offer up solutions for people, but sometimes people just need to kind of sit in that sadness and just want something to distract themselves. And so her like hugging him and asking if he would want pizza, she's saying, you know, you're not ruining my life. You're not at all. And there's like just a sense of comfort in being there and understanding and not giving advice on how she should fix all his problems. And again, he is the one who fixes his problems, showing that people are capable of fixing their own situations, but they need that support, and without that support, that is why they're falling apart. When Charlie's having trouble with his friends, he's talking to his sister. Support system, very important. You can't always talk about your friends about everything, especially when you have problems with their friends. You can't always talk to your teacher about everything. The topic doesn't concern the teacher. You can't always talk to your sister or your parents about that stuff. Sometimes that's just not the case, you know? And so having these different outlets for these different types of problems is very important. Not that people are only utilized for being outlets for problems, it's more just having people with different experiences that you can go to when you don't know where else to go is so important. The way that Tao and Elle talk to each other, because Tao and Elle are close with each other within the relationships of the friend group, and Tao being very aware of his fear of abandonment, clearly very stressed out all the time and telling Elle about it, and yet it's balanced out because Elle always talked about her problems during her time when she was having a really rough semester at Truman. Her being honest with him when he's being annoying, and then that scene when he's going, I'm sorry, am I not being entertaining enough for you? Oh god, I love William Gao. Yeah, so the way that Tao is able to express himself and Elle pretty much only opens up to Tao about how she's feeling is also a great sense of communication, especially since Elle will be very upfront with Tao when he's thinking things in a very like anxious or logical way. He's like, Nick's stolen him and he should be here with his real friends, and she's like, Nick is his friend and he's not going to Harry's party because he's trying to become a little horrible person. It's because he's there for Nick. Like, dude, come on. Yeah, I just really love that. And even the way Tao and Nick finally talk with each other after Tao has so much animosity towards Nick and thinking that Nick is trying to lead Charlie on because he's so protective of his friends and also, you know, feels threatened. The way they're able to talk to each other, how they both have a third-party insight into their dynamics with Charlie that the other wouldn't really think about. Like, Tao telling Nick straight up what is just the truth, that even though it's okay that Nick take his time, figure out things with his sexuality, and is completely allowed to do that, and that's okay, and that's fine. Charlie does want something more than just sneaking around. Charlie is out, and he has faced a lot of shit for it, and he does probably want to be free in that, and it would be nice. And that even if you can't give that to him, that would be okay, but it's always going to make him feel a little bit shitty, and you know, that's just very upfront. And even though Tao feels like he's not been appreciated and that he just wishes that they told him about the relationship, Nick telling him Charlie clearly just cares about his opinion so much, he's afraid of what Tao might think. Yeah, there's just so much happening there. But yeah, great communication across all the boards, and just like the emphasis on communication, like Mr. Ajayi being like, did you talk to him? You should talk to him. Like,
what about your friends? Have you talked to them about it?
They wouldn't get it.
Well, why not?
Because they're not gay.
Just talk to him.
You should talk to him.
Yeah, so should you.
No. I'm gonna stay pissed off with him for a bit longer.
You should try rugby. It's good for releasing negative emotions.
The next thing that I want to discuss is adapting the show so it is digestible to allies or people learning without diminishing what is important. Also expanding into wider audiences. And what I mean by this is mainly the way that the show dialed back the language that a lot of the comic had, just in terms of cursing and the like, because then the show could be released with a lower age rating and more people can see it. And I think it's especially important for younger people to see it. So that's very good. The show is enjoyable for everybody, and there's so many things that you can learn while watching it. In particular, I think it's important to not only represent characters and represent people in the way that the show did, which shows an example of how you should talk to queer people or what might not be the right things to say, such as the introduction of Imogen's character and the way that she talked to Tara, and she was like, you know, I'm an ally, and there are a lot of people like that.
Tara literally kisses her girlfriend at a crowded party, and people are still asking her if she's dating a guy she kissed once when she was 13.
So that girl is her girlfriend?
That girl? I'm right here.
I'm not like homophobic. I'm an ally.
Congratulations. We thank you for your service.
And I think that Imogen's character, she improves and she has things to learn, but her heart's in the right place. But there are a lot of people like that. People make mistakes, they make comments that can be uncomfortable for others, and it is just important that those things are addressed and not ignored, and figuring out alternative ways to say things that won't offend people and will not be hurtful to them more so is very valuable from this show. In particular, there's very specific language use in terms of like that one scene where Charlie uses they them pronouns when referring to Nick's possible crush, going, "Are they not a girl?" Or just learning proper phrasing is important. For example, as a transgender person, people using terminology that is outdated or like phrasings that are inaccurate, such as "you were born a boy," "you were born a girl," when in reality the proper way to discuss that is "your gender assigned at birth," or "you were assigned female at birth, you were assigned male at birth," things like that. These are the proper ways to discuss these topics, and those are learned things. A lot of people, they mean well. And I understand that. I think a lot of trans people understand that. A lot of queer people understand that. It's just that sometimes we're just very fed up with these things, and that's why we want representation, so that people can learn that without us always having to face these hurdles all the time. All we ask for is effort, but active effort is important. The healthy dynamics within the show are important to just show anybody, because it really dives into ideas of consent and what a relationship can look like that is beautiful and is something that can make both people in the relationship thrive, and that's an important message to show people regardless of what their sexual orientation is. We also see the idea of bystanders when Nick talks about Harry is the one instigating homophobia towards Charlie, but he's still very upset with the other rugby players, his other friends on the team, because they just stood there. And this idea of being a bystander and how it is in so many ways just as bad, because you're not saying anything, in fact they were promoting it because they're egging Harry on, and these are things that allies need to understand, that we need you to step up, especially since we're always the ones who have to fight for ourselves. We're always the ones speaking up for our own communities. We need other people to educate themselves and to uplift our community. It is very, very essential to how we win our rights, our respect, our sense of feeling okay in our life. I think there's also this notion of addressing the fact that, especially if someone is bisexual, in Nick's case, well, why couldn't you just be with a girl? The introduction of Imogen's character partially serves also the purpose for straight audiences who may not understand. It is really just not a choice, and just because there's a girl that you could potentially like, especially in this case that Imogen is Nick's friend. They have an established relationship, they talk all the time, she likes him. In a lot of ways they could make a very good couple together, but he likes Charlie. Establishing that and then also showing a way to properly address that. Like, she's gonna be upset that she can't be with Nick like that, but having her not be upset about it in a way that conveys queerness being the issue or antagonizing queerness. Rather, it is just a general sadness that could have happened if Nick liked a girl, you know? But yeah, the establishment of a potential straight relationship, and also the idea that there is a sense of a shield in a straight passing relationship, even though someone is still bisexual, but that you just like who you like. Doesn't make you any less bisexual, doesn't change anything. You like who you like. For parents, showing a healthy way to respond when your child comes out. Also, showing a healthy dynamic between Charlie and his father and how to support your child when they're going through something. No plot line with shitty parents. Thank you. We don't need always there to be horrible family issues. Queerness is always put in relation to bad family issues, just horrible events happening, dramatic coming outs that always result in some terrible accident. Y'all, it's not perfect. Sometimes it's definitely like that. That happens. That does happen. And it can happen a lot. But it's not every situation. And associating queerness with horrible things, no. Like, there's a reason why queerness is still a thing and why there are so many people that are so joyously queer, and that's because of so many different aspects of just being yourself, aspects of community, etc., etc. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. A show like this also shows an example of how, even though all these characters come from a position of massive privilege in terms of their access to so many resources and having people around them that are very supportive, having a huge support system, such as with Charlie. He has a huge support system of his family, his friends, certain teachers, and yet he's still facing these problems with bullying and the ridiculing and his own internal problems that came from those bullying and from his first relationship with Ben. These are all things that he still has to deal with, and it's why it's so important to establish that then if you are having these problems as a queer person when you have that level of privilege and resources, it is so incredibly horrible to then imagine, or not need to imagine, what it's like when you do not have those privileges. When people struggle with their home lives, or don't have access to medication for things relating to their mental health, or they have financial instability in their life, or they can't medically transition in the way that they wish to. These are all aspects of privilege that you need to understand as an ally. I also wanted to address the characterization of Harry. Harry is just kind of like this one-dimensional bully, but something that I think is important to note is the way that even though he is a one-dimensional bully pretty much, he is depicted as having a little bit more depth in the sense of when he is told off by Nick, Nick directly uses very clear language of, Harry, that's homophobic. And addressing that and confronting it, Harry has these moments after, once Nick walks away, or like when these things keep happening, where he is waiting for other people to join in, agree with him so that they can egg him on. He's waiting for validation from others. And the moment where Nick walks away, he has this look on his face. He's clearly very uncomfortable and doesn't understand why Nick is acting that way. And a lot of this likely has to do with the fact that his entire life he has been encouraged and told that this behavior is how he's going to be perceived well, helpful in why he's popular, helpful in why he's liked. And so when he's finally confronted for the first time, he's very confused by it. And so it shows us why it's important to stand up to these things. Because when you make it this assertive, decisive language, you are making it very clear what is wrong, and you're not condoning it anymore. Especially for people like Harry, who have only learned one way of how to conduct themselves and don't know that there is another way to act. Because Harry is a child, he is 16. You know, all of these characters are children, pretty much, except for the literal adults, but they're portraying children. And so we just really need to focus here.
He's my friend.
But why? Do you just feel sorry for him because he's gay?
What?
Oh my god, nah, wait. Do you think he has a crush on you? Oh my god, how sad.
That's homophobic, Harry.
Come on, mate.
And I really don't like you. Happy birthday.
The last thing I want to talk about today is representation. Of course, this had to be mentioned. It is extremely important. And they're just key things that I feel really added to the story, or just were things that made so much sense to bring over from the comic. First of all, we have the proper casting of people of color and trans people within the series. It wouldn't make sense to have Tao be white or for Elle to be cis. Even when you don't necessarily have a story that's surrounding race or gender or other marginalized groups in particular, and there's more of an emphasis on queerness in the story overall, it is so important to understand and emphasize the intersectionality that is prevalent throughout having a marginalized identity, because the whole point of a show like this is to display real experiences and the joy that comes from the love and friendship of these characters. How can you expect to portray the diversity of such an experience, such as queerness, without understanding the fact that queerness encompasses people of all races, ethnicities, and genders? That's why having casting like Yasmin Finney, a black trans girl, for the role of Elle, who is a black trans girl, makes so much sense and is so important and a very obvious decision, and yet sometimes it gets lost on people. I don't know why. Queer actors, trans actors are not, especially trans actors of color, are not represented, are not shown as they should be, especially when it comes to a show that is being put on a major platform such as Netflix. Having that visibility is extremely important, and knowing that that actor or actress is playing the role from experience and understanding that topic wholeheartedly makes all the difference, and you can tell in the show or the movie. But yeah, it was just nice having, you know, a trans person, non-binary person in the casting. Kizzy is non-binary, which I had no idea, but I was very pleasantly surprised to find out. I was like, yay! In terms of the representation with people of color, in particular, I think it's just so nice to have characters that are well fleshed out and well thought out, who happen to be people of color. And in terms of that, I think I can speak better on the representation that Tao provides. In an interview I remember seeing, William Gao talked about how no one had really even heard of the idea of there being a Asian British actor for a role like this, or just things like that you do not expect to see. It's just very telling when within the Western context how many stereotypes there are incorporated into Western media. So to have Westernized media that just knows what not to do feels so big in a lot of ways, just because I am so used to seeing Asian characters on screen who adhere to being like the goth Asian girl who only says like super weird things randomly for comedic effect and has like a pink streak in her hair, or is like quirky, or like the artsy Asian girl, and then she's defying her immigrant parents' expectations, or like the nerdy, like friend, but they're always the friend, they're always a side character, and they're always overshadowed by the white protagonist. But in this show, even though Tao is the main protagonist's friend, he is completely well fleshed out. He is a frequently seen character. We switch from different narratives of these different characters, and we really get to see the perspective of Tao. We just see him as a person. We see his interests, the way that he talks with his friends, the banter that he has with them, and just him, and how that is never overshadowed by Charlie's story. And in fact, I think that everybody enhances the story together. There's even just the smallest thing of Tao's mom not having an accent. And it's not that I'm saying that Asian people, we never have accents. It is not an uncommon thing, but what is common in a lot of Western media is that there will be an Asian actor who has to make a fake accent. Often it sounds sort of ridiculous, but even if it doesn't and it sounds authentic, the person does not speak like that at all in real life, and the accent has there's no reason for it. It doesn't make sense usually for what's going on. So it's very frustrating to see that. But in the show, even just the smallest thing of Tao's mom, her not having an accent, and also that she is completely accepting of Elle, uses her pronouns, dotes on her, and loves her. As Tao says, he's like, she loves you even more than me. I mean, you never see portrayals of that. You always see, when there's the introduction of a person of color who's a parent, it's always like the immigrant parent who's strict and will never accept you, doesn't want you to be in art school, doesn't want you to be an artist, hates that you're queer, hates that you're trans. It's a whole thing. But in this, she not only completely accepts Elle and integrates her into this idea of this found family, but also encourages the relationship blooming between her and Tao. You barely see her, but that is just such a great thing that you never see represented ever. Along with this, the integration of Elle's storyline and seeing more of what her life is like, along with Tara being included with that, is just so nice to see, because along with representation such as Tao, and such as Elle, such as Tara, we need people of color just being people. We don't always need things that are about our race, but we also do need some portrayals of things that have our race. That's why we need to have more representation, but you can't just have it only about the issues. You need to also have it about the love and support, and just showing different people are whole people with personalities and various attributes and different sides to them.
I think it's a very valid criticism that people wish there was more exploration of the experiences specific to POC in this show in a predominantly white area. And I agree that the addition of this could be a good push for improving the show. Though, I do think there's something to say about understanding that we sometimes hold shows like this to a higher standard than straight or white shows because there are less of them. I think this show does a lot considering how much it's trying to cover. What I wouldn't want is for it to try and do everything and then ultimately fail. I can also see how, since Alice is a white author, she might not reflect the experiences of POC correctly and instead focuses on developing good characters who aren't just white. This prevents the problems of reducing characters to their race or stereotypes. But it's a gray area and not all POC think the same as me. Wanting more from this show is okay. This is why we need all kinds of shows, because one intersectional experience is not reflective of everyone.
What's also so valuable about that is seeing people of color that are realistic characters makes it more likely that people will be able to relate to them and see themselves in them. It is so hard as a person of color to see yourself in white people when they just look nothing like you and their cultural experiences differ a lot from yours, and the way that they're treated can often be very different. And so having that representation having people be able to go, yes, that's like me. And I am like Tao because of the way that he does this, and I love the way that he, like does a little quirky dance with Elle, and I relate to the way that Elle is sort of reserved when you first meet her, but then like opens up as you get to know her, and I love how empathetic Tara is, and I see myself in her because I look like her or whatever. These are things that matter, because when you don't see people that look like you feeling the feelings that you felt, you'll think that those are things that only white people have experienced or that only white people get. Like, I remember growing up and not even seeing myself as being able to be trans because the only trans representation I ever saw was white. And so I can imagine how valuable it is to young black girls to see that representation, to see Tara, to see Elle, and see them with their natural hair as well.
Or styled with hair that has a distinct kinky curl pattern.
Because there is so much discrimination against black hair, and the idea of needing to straighten it or quote-unquote correct it, and is just so inherently racist. And so seeing natural hair displayed proudly and just being a normalized thing in the show is so valuable for people to look on the screen and go, that's like me. And it takes away from that culture of shame that a lot of people of color are often surrounded by on a daily basis. Next, I'd like to talk about how Heartstopper defies a lot of tropes. And it just makes a lot of sense because instead of it being like we are defying stereotypes, it's just representing real people and how they actually are, and how that directly conflicts with a lot of stereotypes that are prevalent throughout society. Some of these things include addressing the idea that gay men have to be effeminate, or that men who like men have to be effeminate. And we see Nick taking interest in things that are inherently associated with what would probably fit into male gender roles and the rules of heterosexuality. This idea that like people would never guess that he's into these things, and yet he's also super emotionally sensitive to other people and caring and just perceptive of others around him, which could be seen as more effeminate, I guess, to have emotions, which is kind of weird and dumb. No, it is. It's just weird and dumb. But yeah, there's that. But then his interests are aligned very much with what people would associate with heterosexuality, or the fact that Charlie may be gay, but it's not like he's just terrible at sports. Like, these things have to do with practice. They can have a sense of camaraderie to them and sportsmanship, and anyone of any sexuality can partake in them and be great at them. Or the idea that there has to be this separation between straight people and queer people, when yes, there is a sense of like more immediate camaraderie that might come with talking to queer friends, just in terms of that sense of safety. But Tao, the way that he talks, honestly, he talks a lot like how my queer friends talk in terms of his awareness about the topics, and just showing the close relationship between Charlie and Tao without it needing to be like the dramatics of, oh, since Charlie's gay, he must like Tao, because of course, like, no, or like them having a close relationship with each other and displaying that without it needing to have the infiltration of very unnecessary forced romance. Another huge thing to me is the establishment of strong female friendships, women that are supporting other women. So much of the media shows women tearing down other women, especially when it comes to rivalries, fighting over a guy. In this, we see a romanticization of Elle wishing to be friends with Tara and Darcy, and Tara and Darcy being super inviting to her.
You're officially part of the inner circle. Also, hers are really soft. That's the gayest excuse I've heard.
You've befriended the school lesbians.
And just the kindness that they have with each other is so heartwarming and wonderful. All the main characters really display that type of empathy with one another, whether it steps out of gender roles or not. That sense of being good friends or doing your best to be a good friend is such a big theme throughout the series. And speaking of the development of not pitting women against women, or pitting the main lead against a rival love interest that is usually a girl, I want to talk about Imogen. A lot of people, especially originally, dislike Imogen. The introduction of her character is very much a rival to Charlie because she has a crush on Nick, and I think off the bat, we are supposed to sort of dislike her because of that. And yes, she can be insensitive. I think her role in the story is to display also how there are a lot of well-meaning people who talk about being allies, but can ask very insensitive questions or just outright say like homophobic things. And Imogen is display of that. There's so many people I know that their heart is in the right place, but they really do not know the proper language of how to say things, or they just don't know the right way to handle a situation. Like, they just really do not know the right thing to say, and it can be very uncomfortable for queer people, especially since we're put in a position where they make us feel like we're supposed to educate them. In reality, allyship should not be putting a job of education onto queer people who are typically just living their life. Do your own research or talk to people that are willing to explain to you. It's good to have those resources, but yeah. The establishment of Imogen's character is put in the idea of the typical rival girl who everybody is supposed to dislike. Okay, she did some things that were questionable. Don't get me wrong. Like, she made some assumptions, she jumped to some conclusions about how Nick felt about her and their relationship and a lot of things like that. But when it came to communication, when it came to accepting that Nick did not feel the same way about her, from the beginning, she's just confessing her feelings to someone that she likes. She doesn't really do that much wrong, even if some things are a little bit questionable. I feel like she really does come back to where she needs to be. And that is being a supportive friend for Nick. When Nick explains things to her and communicates with her, she thanks him for being honest. She says she understands. She immediately is there with him and supports him. In the end, she is happy for Nick and Charlie. She's looking at them. She's just like smiling. She's supportive of her friend. The story doesn't need to villainize her. She accepts him and she's there for him. And the purpose of her crush for understanding Nick's situation better also made sense. So don't hate Imogen. I mean, like, every single character has at least some sense of nuance. Even Harry and Ben, okay, who are just extremely unlikable, horrible people in a lot of ways. But also for Ben, even though it doesn't excuse his behavior, the purpose of his character is also showing what not to do, and also the way that internalized homophobia can fester in an extremely ugly manner that is sad to look at, because Ben is so clearly insecure about the fact that he likes men, to the point where he just can't even handle seeing other people happy, and he directly creates conflict in order to feel better about himself or to put Charlie down because he sees Charlie feeling better, which is so unbelievably shitty of him.
You don't get to have an opinion about anything I do.
Do you want me to go around telling people about you and Nick?
Do you want me to go around telling people about me and you? That's what I thought. Except I wouldn't do that because I'm a decent person.
Another part of the representation that I thought was just key to the show is different types of sexualities and different types of relationships, in terms of there being both interracial couples, a gay couple, a lesbian couple, and a straight couple, and how all of them had some type of queerness to them, but still just showing those dynamics is just wow. When have we ever seen that shit? The reason this is important is because sapphic couples are going to experience things very differently from gay couples. The social acceptance and like attitudes between gay couples versus sapphic couples is just different. It's not really a matter of saying one is worse or better. It's really just a matter of it being very different, because the attitudes that people have towards women versus towards men and the stereotypes that go along with the gender roles associated with that is just very different, as I said. Wow, I said different so much. Okay. With Nick and Charlie, there is a lot more discussion of locker room talk, also sort of this idea of the boys club and the excuse that, oh, we're just joking. Like, you can't take a joke and you're being too sensitive, and a lot of these things that adhere to male-dominated spaces and the fear of violence and aggression that can come from that. This differs from the problems that Tara and Darcy experience in an all-girls school, where the attitudes towards them being lesbians is very much a sense of disgust, sort of talking behind their backs, and this attitude of people not believing them and second-guessing them and denying something that is just very factual. And this is very common amongst the attitudes towards lesbian or sapphic couples, because people just cannot believe women, like, I don't know, or non-binary people. Like, it's just really weird, because lesbians can be non-binary, by the way. But it's not just the lack of believing, it's also the addressing of microaggressive comments, because in a lot of ways it's more, I think the microaggressions were more addressed rather than the direct violence that sapphic couples can definitely face, but it was just in the show that we see more of these sort of microaggressions. And the culture and idea of just the word lesbian being seen as dirty, the way that Tara is really struggling with the way that people seem to see her differently or treating her differently just because she came out, and the way she wasn't prepared for it, and seeing these couples being at different levels in terms of their comfortability with their sexuality. Like, Tara and Darcy are both open about being lesbians, but as Tara explains to Darcy, when they first got together, she could barely even say the word lesbian. There's so much culture around the idea of it being this like dirty word or an insult, versus the term gay is, though seen as an insult, is still more widely, I think, said. In a lot of ways, people might think, like, what's the big deal with these comments? They aren't, like, aggressive. They aren't getting, like, beat up or something. And, you know, it's not really that bad what they're saying. They're just saying, oh, I never would have guessed you were a lesbian, or what a shame, or, oh my god, you're a lesbian. Like, it's just made into this big thing, and this idea of there needing to be shame around it. And especially what's different is that it's so grounded in sexism, the idea that the purpose of women is the need to please and satisfy their roles in relation to men, and that is what is such a key difference about it.
Also, the villainization of femininity. The idea that men liking men is bad because it places them into the role of a woman and is supposedly emasculating, and women liking women is a rejection of the expected feminine role, which is supposed to adhere to a love for men.
But yeah, I think Alice knew how important it was to include a sapphic relationship in the show for a reason, especially since in most cases you don't have a show that has more than one gay relationship. The fact that there is also a lesbian couple displayed in a well done way, not from the male gaze also, it's like just nice to have it like that. When they share their kiss together, it's very wholesome, it's so bright, and it's a longer scene done on purpose because we need that. We need more of that.
Scenes of gay and lesbian intimacy are often shortened or censored compared to their straight counterparts. Also, there will be a bit of spoilers for soon after in the comic about some main characters. It's kind of obvious though. Skip to the end of the chapter to not see this.
Another thing I wanted to comment on is the beginning of the development of Tao and Elle's relationship. In the comics, Tao and Elle are together. Yeah, it's true. We all know it. We love it. We love them. But yeah, Tao is known to be a straight character. He is very open about this fact. Like, it's so hard. It's so hard to come out straight. The reason that the establishment of their dynamic is so important is because oftentimes trans people are depicted as still being the gender that they were assigned at birth in relationships, and a lot of people go, oh, that's just a gay relationship because that's a man with a man, or that's a woman with a woman, because they're completely invalidating and not understanding the concept of transness, or just directly trying to antagonize trans people. We're often seen as tricking people or being malicious or being predators, and it's just so goddamn exhausting to see that happen over and over again. And so to have the establishment of a clearly straight relationship between Elle and Tao, and for Elle to be just completely seen as a woman that she obviously is so important, and establishing a healthy dynamic for her that in no way needs to be tainted with violence, because Elle just deserves to have someone who accepts and loves her, and it's just about that. Thank fucking God. Anyway, but it also clarifies just confusion that some people might have. There are people that really do not understand and just genuinely want to know, does this make the relationship gay? And the answer is no. Tao is straight. These things clarify because it's shown. When you show it, people will understand more. Now I'm going to be talking about the trans representation. Now, let me tell you, I don't think I've ever seen a show with a trans person that is well represented. And even if there happens to be a trans person in a show and it is good, the person usually takes up a very, very small segment. But in Heartstopper, Elle has a huge and main plot line through the entire show, and she is a main character. The fact that you are getting to see someone who is trans, especially a trans person of color, a trans black girl, someone who is part of the center of the show and is just navigating her life at her new school, and yet her transness is still addressed without it needing to be a big deal, not only shows an example of how to use language effectively, but also is just so refreshing to see. You never see a trans person, like usually in media. And on top of that, never a trans person of color. If you see a trans person, you gotta pick, okay, you got a person of color or you got a trans person. You don't see it together. On top of it, she's a well fleshed out character, not a caricature of a black trans person. She's given depth. We see her in a group of friends that is accepting of her and seeing no problems with that. And especially just the use of language is so important. The way that right from the beginning it is established that Elle is trans, but it's just part of the casual conversation. Tao talks about how he got Elle's drink and he forgot because she's gone to an all-girls school, and it makes sense that she went to an all-girls school because it's safer for her there, and also it's her gender, and you know, it just makes sense because she's a girl and she's going to all-girls school. But also they miss her, and oh god, like, yeah, you know, that teacher is such a transphobe and can't even believe that he's not using her name still, and that's just ridiculous. The way that Darcy and Tara casually ask her if she was at Truman, and she says, yes, it's much better for me at Higgs now, and they're like, yeah, of course, and that's it. But it's not like her transness is ignored. It's a very open thing, and there's this idea that you need to tiptoe around the topic of queerness or transness, but you really don't need to. There's a very easy way to just talk about these things, acknowledge these things, acknowledge that they exist, without it needing to be the center of attention because it's not the purpose. There doesn't need to be a problem with it in terms of that barrier of how to speak about it. The next thing I want to cover is talking about the parents and the teachers, the parental relationships that we see for these characters when it comes to Charlie and when it comes to Nick's mom and Charlie's dad is just fantastic. So first, I'll talk about the teachers. I mean, in particular, I just want to talk about Mr. Jai because Mr. Jai is the coolest. Basically, the reason that his character in particular is really important is because he is a mentor character for Charlie and shows the importance of having an adult that is there for queer people. Not only that, but he is queer himself, he is gay himself, and he understands Charlie's problems in a way that Charlie feels like his friends don't understand because they aren't gay. And so when it comes to having your support system, a lot of times we can't just rely on one set of people or on one particular person, not only because that's not a healthy dynamic for either one in the relationship, but also because one person isn't going to be able to help you with everything that you might want advice on. And having a sense of someone who is in a position where they are wiser than you and can help you out from knowing things that you just may not have perspective on is extremely valuable. The idea that adults can be reliable is something that is not necessarily always promoted in teen shows. And honestly, it's not due because adults disappoint us a lot.
He was in my maths class last year.
Did he ever say anything to you?
Yeah, sometimes. Surprise, he's transphobic as well.
You should have said something. You could have gone and told a teacher.
Yeah, maybe. But it wasn't like he was the only one that was saying stuff to me.
But in terms of Charlie's teacher, the fact that he's there to guide Charlie but doesn't try to fix Charlie's problems for him and make sure that Charlie is given support but is the one to go through and make those efforts to not only better himself but better the relationships he has with others around him is key to what makes that relationship so valuable. Especially that moment, God, I can't forget this. The time that Charlie is hiding in the art room again and Mr. Jai goes, "You've been in here a lot. You better not be here for the sports day. I am not going to let you hide in here." And he says that he's not going to force him, but that when he was in school, and he always relates it back to his own experiences, showing that even though he has a sense of authority in his position, he's not there to hold it over in that space when it's more about giving advice and showing, you know, I'm a person too, and I've been through what you've been through, and having that be comforting.
No. Right, I'm not going to make you go because I'm a nice teacher. And when I was at school, I thought that hiding from it all was safer, easier. But sometimes the loneliness was just as bad. Don't let anyone make you disappear, Charlie.
Sometimes loneliness was just as bad. Wow, yeah. Because it's so terrifying all the time to face problems that you feel like could just disappear if you just didn't even interact with them in the first place. But it's not like they're gonna go away if you do that, and it's not like things are gonna get any better if you don't face them. And sometimes when you face those issues, then you at least have the chance of things getting better, and you have the chance for change that you would never have otherwise gotten. And also just because you can't hide forever from things. And the way that he says, don't let other people make you disappear, is so good. Don't let other people influence how you're going to live your life, and don't let them take away and distract from the joy that you could be having. On to the parents. I know that we don't show as much about Charlie's mom, and there's things that we don't see in terms of like the full dynamics of the family. Like we don't see. Anyway, this is because that's not really the point. It is much more of a focus on supportive family members, which I really appreciate it, especially since Charlie's dad, a super, super caring parent who also knows how to diffuse situations, even if it's very subtle and not really shown that much. But like when Charlie's in that situation with Ben, he goes, "Charlie, ready to go?" And then he doesn't even know, but he's checking in with his son. He's always saying that you can call me. I'll be there for you. I will drive you. I will be there for you. And especially having that attention when so many times fathers are displayed as being absentee and it being a normal thing, or like less in tune with their emotions, being more standoffish. Having Charlie have such a great relationship with his father, and his father clearly being there for him and accepting him when Charlie is struggling and otherwise is just thank you. And then the coming out scene with Nick, I mean, can we just talk about that for a second? How much more perfect of a response could you possibly get? Just like, the scene is so important and so impactful. Not the scene in particular, but it just shows that like even when you have supportive parents, even when you have great friends, even when you have a supportive teacher, it doesn't mean that you don't face problems. You know, there's so many problems that these characters experience because of their queerness, and showing that turmoil and showing how you don't need to use queerness as a device to dramatize when there's enough to go off of if you're just a good writer is just Anyway, so back to the parents. This coming out scene is phenomenal. It is a terrific example of how you should respond when your child comes out to you. A lot of the time, Nick's mom showed signs of just the heteronormativity of expecting Nick to like girls and saying the right girl will come along. It makes him hesitate. The little comments here and there, like, I know that you just wanted to watch Pirates of the Caribbean for the woman in it, and I know that women, just like you like women. And it's like, that's true, but also it's sort of like this very terrified feeling of how is she going to feel about that I like men. When he sits down to tell her, when she realizes that it's serious and she stops what she's doing, the attention of her body language, the way she leans in, the way she's nodding once Nick starts to tell her and lets him finish, embraces him, tells him, that's wonderful. Thank you for telling me. The thank you for telling me is important because it establishes the fact that you understand that it is not your right to know these things, and it is something that is a very personal aspect of someone's life that they are sharing with you that you don't necessarily have a right to, and the fact that they're telling you means that they have a level of trust with you, usually, to tell you, especially in that kind of situation. Sometimes it's not necessarily a matter of trust, but like, you know what I mean? It's just a great way to respond. And also, I'm sorry if I ever made it seem as though that wouldn't be okay. Addressing the fact that she made those comments in the past, she understands that there's a reason why her son was hesitating and he didn't just openly say it when he started his relationship with Charlie. Understanding that and then addressing it directly, saying that she loves him, she's happy for him. That scene not even being that long, but just hitting so close to home. That scene will just go down in history, man. Sorry, I don't make the rules. The last thing I want to just quickly go over in terms of representation is the fact that this adaptation was picked up, one that has an author who is known to be AroAce, is so valuable.
AroAce is an abbreviation for someone who is aromantic and asexual. Feel free to read the following definitions for clarification. I've cited the websites I got these definitions from too, which are great resources to learn more. Also remember that someone who is aromantic is not always asexual and vice versa. These are also very basic definitions, and each of these labels are part of a wider spectrum of identities.
Especially coming from a place where the stereotypes of AroAce people are that they're robots and that they are unfeeling and they don't understand relationships, when I think in so many ways, and as it's very clearly displayed in a show like HEARTSTOPPER and in the comics that HEARTSTOPPER is based off of, that people on the AroAce spectrum in a lot of ways probably understand relationships a lot better than people who are not AroAce. I'm not saying this is always the case, but they can. And just it completely defies the idea that AroAce people do not understand emotions or like don't understand dynamics, because it's just a focus more on typically friendships or maybe the romantic sides of things if one is on the asexual spectrum. And Alice Osman's deep understanding of, I guess, just how relationships work and how romance and friendship can coincide with each other in such a beautiful manner, clearly taking care to show these different relationships and the roles that they take in people's lives. That is just great. And especially since I identify as being on the asexual spectrum myself, it's great to see someone who is asexual being successful. Yeah, I just love it. We just need more stories from actual queer people to represent queer people, okay? Here are my conclusive statements. Overall, Heartstopper is fantastic. Heartstopper is my favorite show. As someone who doesn't rewatch anything ever, and the fact that I'm still like hooked on it and thinking about it all the time and still want to see more of it is very telling, just as a person who doesn't really rewatch things. And I just feel like I tumbled into this world at a time when I really needed it. I was finally comfortable with at least my sexuality at the time, and even if I didn't really understand my gender, this comic really has been there with me for a lot of me figuring out who I am and just being a comfort there for me as a representation of a relationship that I would love to have, or just the one that I deserve and that people like me and like us all deserve. So I really just applaud Alice Osman for creating that world, for making sure to give us those bright moments that we have been seeking for so long. It is of the utmost importance to me. Okay, so my camera just totally died, and then I used the other battery, and the battery also was dead. I think they were like slowly just running out of juice, and then it simply just they just don't work now. So even though I waited, it's still not charging, so I'm just gonna be using my phone. So the conclusion that I wanted to have for this very, very fucking long video essay is the reason that this is so significant isn't because it's the first of its kind. There's been queer media before, and I'm sure that there's a lot of very great queer media that I don't know about as well that does a great job of representing queer characters, trans characters, etc. I think just what highlights this in particular, though, is that it has a way of encompassing so many characters and so many things going on while also maintaining a story that is understandable, well-paced, and thorough in its job of understanding the nuances that the problems that it addresses. Along with this, a lot of the queer media that I've seen before has this idea of being a step in the right direction without there really being more to that. And what I mean by this is that when we see media such as Love, Simon, we're seeing something that is significant, but we're seeing a step in terms of it being a very particular and very narrow focus on one type of experience that is also not very reflective of a lot of queer experiences. And that is why it's so important that we represent these wider experiences, because what queer media should have is a mix. We shouldn't just have one type of experience that represents the best parts of the community or only the worst parts of the community. In an ideal world, queerness is so accepted and so understood that it has all kinds of media, including the mediocre, the bad, and the good. But then we understand the difference. When you put forth more queerness in media like this, and you do so in a way that also promotes healthy dynamics and healthy relationships, not only for queer people, but also for straight people, for allies, for cis people, etc. That is so helpful. What's different about this show from the others is it doesn't just feel like a step forward, it feels like an actual representation of what we need and what we've wanted for ages. And that is characters that are fully fleshed out, that represent the intersectionality and the diversity of the modern day people, and that promotes messages of love and positivity and kindness that are so often left out of portrayals that we see of queer people. Because often the mere idea of queer joy, of trans joy, it's seen as a radical act. our love is seen as a protest rather than it being something that is normal and beautiful. You may not understand if you aren't a queer person, because sometimes people really do wonder, why is it that we are so proud of who we are, or at least we try to be, and what is it about our identity that we have to celebrate when there's so much suffering included with it? And it's not our identity that's intertwined with suffering in any way, it's more the attitudes that surround it. And so changing ourselves and morphing to what is expected is its own type of suffering and own type of pain. And if we are able to fight so that people after us don't have to deal with that, as so many of the queer, specifically trans activists have done for us in the past, to make things better and to move things in the right direction, that is what matters. Because there's nothing like the joy that comes from really understanding yourself and learning through others that have expanded beyond what is expected of them, or the gender roles that they were assigned to, or just anything like that. There's so much freedom that comes in that, in just feeling so yourself, feeling an enhanced, more confident version of yourself that you never would have felt like if you didn't learn that there was more that you could be. So please, in general, we need to do better. I mean, there are many things that are coming out that are better, but there's so many times when I think we're doing better and then I see things that are stepping us back. Like, After came out, and I'm like, how do we step back here into these dynamics that I thought that we trashed long ago, of the jealous, possessive boyfriend, or just the guy who displays potential abusive qualities? It's just like, we need to stop, okay? We need to stop romanticizing these things, okay? Instead, we should romanticize healthy dynamics, okay? But this is stuff that would benefit everybody, okay? Just, we need to do better. If you are someone who considers yourself an ally, who wants to learn, maybe doesn't know all the right language, doesn't know the right things to do exactly, that's understandable. But we need people to be there for us, because we're always fighting, and we have historically been fighting for so long. We need that support in order to be able to keep our rights, in order to win our rights, in order to live freely and authentically without ridicule or fear of going to the bathroom. So we don't expect perfection, but we want people to show up, and we want people to make effort and put in what they can. We're not really demanding more than that, and we're not expecting less than that. But overall, incredible show. I will never forget it. Thank you so much to Alice Osman for being there for the community in this way, presenting us in a way that we've always known ourselves to be like, or that we didn't even know that we could be like or be shown as, and especially giving that love and hope towards a younger audience in a story that can be applied and loved by all people of any background. You have no idea how much that means to me and how much that means to the entire community, I'm sure. So, now that I've done this, thank God I have finished, because I need to write my essay, okay? I have a 10-page paper, people, and I can't complete it if I was only thinking about this, and now I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I've been sitting here for like 7 hours, and it was so fun, but I'm so tired, so I'm probably going to sleep now. If you're wondering what other things I do, you can follow me on Instagram at the.visual.poetry. I am an art student, and I post a lot of art on there. Hopefully I will be making HEARTSTOPPER fan art soon. I don't know, but I don't usually make video essays like this. This was just for fun. Might happen again, might never happen again. We don't know. I do a lot of things related to advocacy, queerness, and artsy shit. So if you're interested in that, do follow. If you made it through this entire video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I worked super hard on this. I made notes for just days and prepared for it, and I got equipment from my school center because I simply do not own this equipment. To other queer people, we deserve this. We needed this. And we can also still do more. We can also still do better. We can always improve. We can always do better when it comes to this media, okay? And don't ever settle for less than that. Don't ever believe yourself to be or deserve less than that. You didn't even have to like the show. Just because I love this show, maybe you hate it, and that's fine, you know? Let's have a discussion in the comments, whatever. Just like have a little discussion. It'd be fun. But yeah, y'all are beautiful. I love you all. Please have a wonderful day, night, evening. Evening and night are the same. Anyway, it was so nice talking here, but I must leave. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.